Hello and welcome to the Awakening Philosophy Podcast. My name is Jed, and we are reading the Phaedo, and we are going through Dialectic training, as the title underneath here says. What is dialectic training? Well, we've read through the text in a certain kind of way that might be a new style of reading to a lot of viewers of the channel. Okay, so we have been reading the Phaedo. We have gotten to the end of the Phaedo. We have realized that the end doesn't make a lot of sense to us. And we have developed a hypothesis as to why that might be the case. Now, as we've been reading in a kind of way that might be new to most people, to a lot of people watching at least. A different style of reading where we're not trying to read it as fast as we can. We're not trying to, we're not reading it with an eye on what we already believe. We're not trying to relate it to our own opinions or project our opinions into the text. We're trying not to leave anything out that's essential. We're trying to look for puzzles that are woven into the text, things that are not explicitly stated, but we feel like they should be there for the text to make sense. We're looking for other things that might be evidence of a puzzle, certain repetitions or certain missing pieces, looking for patterns. We also are pushing the implications from what we conclude earlier. If we come to a conclusion earlier in the text, we should hold on to that conclusion because that conclusion might open up the next section or a later section in the text. Our text should roll on from each other. Unfurl, flow, roll on. There should be a train of reasoning, not just in what is written, but in the puzzles and the hypotheses and the which are possible answers. So the questions and possible answers that we come up with, these should also roll on for us. They should flow and follow a kind of order. We're also looking for what are other things we've discovered as ways to look for puzzles in the text and to read in this kind of a way. Thumbs up. We're looking for key terms that repeat. We're looking for times when a term is used only once. That can often be a key to unlock something. Maybe even the whole text or a whole section. We are looking for, we're looking for certain times when a key term is repeated at different parts of the text, and then we can weave those pieces together. We're looking for where there is analogies. Usually when there's analogies when we're reading Socrates, some of the terms in the analogy will be left out. That's a puzzle. Our job would be, therefore, to fill in the missing terms of the analogy. Once an analogy has been established, the movement to the realm of being is like a fish sticking his head out of the ocean. Okay, what are the other terms given to us in the fish analogy? There are the objects in heaven. There is the sun. There is the water that you see through. There is the air on the surface you're not aware of. There are people on the surface. All of these terms are in the category of fish. Our job would therefore be to figure out, well, what's the equivalent in the realm of being? What's the equivalent in the spiritual dimension? What is he pointing to that he's using this fictional story or analogy or myth to point to? We have to fill that out. Another thing that we have discovered in order to read in this higher way, again, we're not taught this in school. We're not usually reading in this sort of a way. In fact, we usually do the opposite. Or another, before we get on to that, another technique is when we have established that analogy, a fish is to like the soul leaving the body, then there might be an indication that there is a third level. This might not be explicitly stated, but might be hinted at. Socrates says, I'm not going to go into this, or it would be too complicated, or it would take too much time, or something like that. Or maybe we have already established that there are 3 levels, and he's expecting us to bring that conclusion, that understanding with us, to realize, oh, if there's a fish to an earth dweller, then there might be an earth dweller to something else. So that is not only in that first instance when he's giving you the terms, fish is just like something, the sea is to like something of the soul, the air or the surface dweller that the fish is unaware of is like something in philosophy. He's sort of giving us the questions, but that next level where you realize, oh, there is a third level of the analogy, that's even more important because we're discovering the question ourselves. And of course, we've been talking about how good filmmakers like Christopher Nolan makes his films in that way. There will be the myth or the narrative, there will be a meaning to it for the audience to figure out, solve the puzzle, but then there'll be a different level, the real puzzle, that you even have to discover the question first. You have to discover the question even is there before you can go ahead and find the answer. So, pushing the implications to a higher level, in which case you've got the fish terms, you've figured out what the soul terms are, separating the soul from the body, and then you've got to maybe you've filled in the missing terms in that level, but then you've got to do all of the terms in the third level. So all of these are ways of discovering questions and answering those questions. Now, all of these things that we are looking at, key terms, inner pattern, unfolding one after another, the use of dividing it into different applications on different levels, synthesizing that application into a single principle. All of these techniques in reading in the higher way, we also can look for and discover within the structure and nature of the dialectic itself. That is the art we are here to learn. We have concluded in the text by looking at the clues, looking at the one time it was used, weaving it all together, discovering puzzles, discovering questions, the art of the dialectic. And all of that you might be able to find within the dialectic. So as we go, we are going to be practicing the art of the dialectic in the text, using the text as the material. As we go, we can keep in the back of our minds, how is this dialectic thing teaching us how to read? How is all of these things we've discovered in reading in this new kind of way, how can we see that inherent within the dialectic itself? It's only 4 categories, repeated twice. Side A and side B. How can all of that thing we've just reviewed just now, all of these weird, wonderful ways of making reading like playing a video game or solving a mystery novel, or being a Sherlock Holmes detective, this new way of reading where you're engaged, you are forced to engage your own mind at a higher level. You are forced to match the level of mind of the text and the author. You are encouraged to Or if you are going to read properly, you are going to kind of have to, but you're being encouraged and invited to share in the logos at that high level of functioning too. This is a very strange new way of reading. How is all of that? How can we see all of that within the dialectic? If the art of the dialectic is what we're here for, and we can only discover that by this new way of reading, then this new way of reading is essentially important. But our only task, it seems to be, is mastering the art of the dialectic. That's how we can harmonize all of the virtues, the practices of the soul. That seems to be our paideia, or education. And that's the education and nurture that we can take with us into our reincarnations, or if we can separate from the body in nous, contemplation. So if this is our one learning, but we would never have discovered that one learning if we weren't reading in this new way, then this one learning should inform this way of reading, because this way of reading we are going to take with us everywhere, to every text. Every text we read in this podcast series from henceforth, from here on out, should be in this new way that we're discovering. And the better we can understand this within this single art of dialectic, the more familiar we will be with it, the more we can grasp it as a whole, the more we can understand why this weird way of reading is the way it is, must be the way it is beautiful in how it functions, is necessary, and we can sufficiently understand it. Sufficiently, of course, one of those key repeated terms in the text that tells us that dialectic has worked.
Wow.
So, we can see even that argument, that hypothesis that we made, necessarily has to be so. We would never have discovered the meaning of life is to master the art of the dialectic if we didn't read in this weird way. Now, luckily, we have been keeping an open mind, experimenting, discovering questions, hypothesizing in the loftiest way. This might be the greatest story ever told. This might be the ideal hero's journey. It might be the archetype of all other balloons. Hero's journey, hero's journeys, all other video games, stories, movies, narratives. This might be the archetype or paradigm. We didn't know that, but it was a lofty vision. We had some reason to hypothesize in this way. It was a very lofty vision, but we risked it. We carried it along with us to see if it might pan out. So the other hypotheses, well, if Socrates is a pretty smart fellow, maybe he can write at the level of Christopher Nolan, or even better, implanting questions. If he is the one saying you have to not just trust but go to understanding, he might be writing in that way. If he's saying you have to master the art of the dialectic, you might not be able to solve the whole text unless you are mastering the art of the dialectic. If you're ignoring what he's saying, you're not going to find the puzzle. If you're not paying attention to Christopher Nolan's movie, you won't discover the real meaning. You gotta be engaged. If you're not listening to the song, you might not recognize the meaning of the lyrics. You have to engage. And from that, necessary reasoning that seems beautiful and necessary, we can hypothesize that so too Socrates might be writing with this level of integrity. And therefore, we would be being, if he has that integrity and he's a decent teacher, we would have to ourselves match him. Be a puzzler, be an adventurer, be a Sherlock Holmes detective. So from these lofty hypotheses that we risked and carried with us, we discovered, yeah, that's kind of what's happening. And there are many ways in which we can discover these questions and raise our mind to the level of reading in this way, which we could call reading with a capital R. And as we go, we recognize, hang on a second, as we are learning what reading is, as the dialectic is telling us, you've also got to do side B.
Wow.
Which is what isn't reading. Socrates is giving us a lot of terms, a lot of insight that we can use to do with people who reject the logos, or anti-logos people who say there is nothing real or sound or true about reality. There is no being. We might call them materialists today, or Aristotelians. There's only the physical world. There's no higher causes than that. He talks about people who love fighting, Philonikos. People who think what makes them wise is convincing others of their beliefs. What I like to call professional opinion havers. I noticed that a lot of people who are popular in popular culture are people who seem to first create a lot of controversy. Like, for example, an archetypal person would be Andrew Tate. Early on in his career, I think he was some sort of kickboxer. No one was interested in him. He went on a TV show called Big Brother, and then he realized that if he said things that would be shocking that he didn't really think were true, like chauvinistic or sexist things that were obviously wrong, but were so wrong and unjust that they triggered people, those people would pay attention because we have an interest in justice. So he would make sexist or prejudice or racist or disparaging comments. People go, hey, that's wrong. And of course, they were right. It was wrong. He even knew it was wrong. But he also realized, oh, I'm getting attention. So he realized that he wasn't able to create with the logos. He wasn't mastering the art of the dialectic like we're supposed to. He wasn't actually seeking what justice is. He was just doing the anti-logos, saying the opposite. Anti-logos, the term from the text. This is what justice isn't. Also, he was doing it not because he was interested in dialectic, in helping people, like someone with the art of medicine, helping people become healthy. He was interested in philonikos, a term from the text. Interested in fighting. Literally, he was a kickboxer, but he took that attitude into his soul. Reasoning. Of course, you could approach any athletic discipline with a higher sense, so long as you apply the dialectic to it. Mastering dianoia, doing philosophy, mastering the art of the dialectic or the art of the logos, using it as an analogy, using it to awaken insights into what's more meaningful, like a analogy, using one level to gain insight into the higher, as we see in our reading. But he wasn't doing that. He was interested in contention or fighting, philonikos. And then, as whether it be Jordan Tate or Donald Trump or Jordan Peterson, all of these kinds of people start with some sort of unjust, anti-logos way of being, rejecting understanding, rejecting truth, rejecting being, rejecting an art. They get a lot of contention, philonikos, they get a lot of views. Now they've got an audience, and then what do all of these people do? As soon as they have the attention of the many, they try to be what I call a professional opinion haver. They try and make it as though their opinions are truth. They're cosplaying being wise. They're cosplaying true wisdom. They haven't read the Phaedo. They haven't puzzled on what is the virtue of wisdom. They haven't discovered in the Phaedo that there is a higher level of wisdom where you integrate an experience of the level of being. They haven't asked the questions, how can we understand and know and go beyond even knowledge in regards to the soul, the meaning of life, the nature of the afterlife? How can we integrate all of this into an art? They haven't asked not a one of those questions we have been asking, but they want to pretend this is the appeal of the vices, as Socrates is saying, the shadows of truth, cosplaying or pretending. Everyone wants to play the knower. Of course, when you reject actual logos and understanding dianoia, if you reject the actual level of being, so there's no actual nous, if you reject the virtues, there's no actual true sound-mindedness, courage, wisdom, and justice. And of course, if you reject the ability to read in the way that we have been learning to read, you won't discover there is an even higher level of epistemology or cognitive functioning, where you can integrate all of that into a state of self, which is the kind of learning we're here to do, something tied to the word phronesis. They don't have any of that. So what are they left with? The lowest kind of cognitive function, opinions. Now you could make the argument, well, actually the lowest is the pathologos, the unsuspected false beliefs that will guide everything you do, even guide your opinions. And that would be true. So they would be themselves, without having the dialectic to uncover and purify their fundamental false beliefs about all those things. Why do they think that there's no truth in logos, understanding, nous, being, and all art? Why do they think there's no oneself? All of these things. That art of the dialectic applied to purifying our false beliefs is called philosophical midwifery. We're starting a new series on the channel dedicated to that, but they don't have any of that, so therefore we can conclude they have what Socrates is calling the greatest defect of the soul, the sickness of the soul, what we might call the pathologos, a word that the translator helped us with in our reading. And they are professional opinion havers. So by understanding what philosophy is in this text and what the dialectic is, we also have to do the dialectic on that, which means recognizing what it isn't. So we can make sense of why all of these people are so popular. They are anti-logos people. They claim, they want to pretend that they are wise so they can be professional opinion havers as whole industries, personal development or life coaching or red pill podcasts, or hey, there's even like conservative, there's most mainstream news networks are only about the personal opinions of the capitalist who owns the network. So it's usually capitalist right-wing propaganda, most mainstream networks, because those are the ones who can manipulate and scam for the monies. Equally so with many of the YouTube channels. They follow a formula. All of these kinds of people start by saying anti-logo stuff, like objectively terrible, unjust, sexist things. So that's the word anti-logos from the text. In order to be contentious, philonikos. Those are the philonikos, and the translation contentious are from the text, so that they can claim to be wise when they're not, by rejecting the existence of wisdom, rejecting the three things that Socrates says, rejecting the logos, rejecting reality as being knowable, as there being a reality beyond the physical, and rejecting the art. So therefore they don't have to have any qualifications, and they're left with opinions, which is curious because true wisdom is unopinable from the text, beyond belief, as we say in the text, as the text said. So Socrates says, I am only different from these people in one respect. that they think wisdom is convincing the many of their own beliefs and opinions. I don't care about that. I only care that I believe what I am saying is true. See how greedy I am for the logos. If I hit upon the truth, it will be naturally beautiful and persuasive and help people as a secondary thing, but I'm not interested in what they do. So this is important. We can recognize why everybody else on this planet is doing this thing, side B, and how different our task is, how special and unique we are to be in this game, and how important it is to master it for ourselves, for our own souls, for our own development. Secondarily, it will have a positive effect on everybody else. If we share it, if we tell our friends, our teachers, if we start a podcast based on it. On what? How to read. How to discover this. How to discover we are here to master the true art of the dialectic, and all our problems are nothing other than the shadow of the dialectic. The anti-logos, the philo-nikos, serving not a love of true learning leading to the love of dianoia, leading to the love of phronesis, but a love of the body, love of fame, love of riches. They're not actually wisdom, they are the opposite. They're saying there is no actual wisdom, it's just my opinions. And of course, if we see the people who have influence in our modern culture, I don't know how much influence they have, but in the mainstream pop culture at least, they follow the same way. Andrew Tate, Peterson, Donald Trump, the same. They'll say something objectively terrible. People will go, oh, well, I have strong opinions because that's not just. And then they will try and convert their clicks, their attention into being a professional opinion haver. I am a life coach. I am a president. What does Tate say? I don't know. I'm a guru for men's health. I teach men how to be good men. What does Peterson say? I'm a savior. They usually appeal to young men. I'm a savior for the young men who are disenfranchised. What does Trump say? I have the wisdom that should rule a whole country. Professional opinion havers. Okay, so that's what we can recognize we are stepping out of. We are challenging that way of being for ourselves. To actually know, well, hang on a second, wonder about and come to the understanding of what is this vice version a shadow of? For it to have power, for it to work in this universe, there must be underlying principles that these are exploiting. Hey, if someone like Trump, let's say, as an example, is openly cartoonishly fascist, criminal, embezzling, actively works to harm the majority as a puppet for the super billionaires, how does he have support from the poor people who he's exploiting? Why do they like this guy who is actively working against their benefit? It makes no sense on the surface unless there is an underlying principle that he is exploiting, what we can call the pathologos. By appealing to that within us that is unlogos, irrational, opposed to the logos or the pathologos, what is familiar to our family and religion and culture from our upbringing, then he can bypass what we are engaged in, the higher cognitive functions. He can bypass true trust, true learning of Socrates, of the logos, trust in the logos. He can bypass understanding, which requires the paradigm of the logos. He can bypass dianoia, logos, and dialectic. He can bypass actual knowledge, nous, He can bypass phronesis. He can bypass all of that to appeal what's objectively wrong because it's familiar. That's the story of all fascists. But we can ask the question, hang on a second, for him to be able to manipulate people to actively work and vote and function against their interests, what seems to be cartoonishly obviously wrong, there must be a principle within our soul that seeks the things that they are a shadow of. What's the pathologos a shadow of? The logos. What is the most cartoonishly unjust person claiming to be just? The most ugly person appears to be beautiful if he resembles what looked beautiful when we were too young to have the art of the logos. Wow, Trump is so beautiful, just like my racist father. That kind of thing. Wow, he claims to be a Christian, but doesn't really believe in that, just like everyone in my family. That kind of thing. Giving a shadow of the actual hierarchy. Oh, we all want to be better, but without, hey, but if everybody is saying there is no logos, there is no paradigm of reality, and there is no art, then there is no way of becoming better. So how do I become better if there is literally, I've been convinced, no way of getting better? There is no ladder of development. There is no art to get better. So how do I get better? Oh, some fascists will come along and say, you're better because you're white. You're better because you're from the country I'm from. You're better because you're a man and not a woman. So therefore we should... But hang on a second, I need to feel that. It doesn't have a feeling because it's a false belief. Beliefs don't have feelings. Okay, we'll take away women's rights. That will give you that feeling. That feeling of pathologos, sickness, injustice. But I'm going to tell you that feeling of injustice when you take away women's rights, try and impose your will upon them. That feeling that is your soul saying, this is terrible, that's actually justice. That's the feeling of truth. That's the feeling of justice and righteousness. That's the game they play. Same thing with religions. You have to believe in that which is absurd, can't be proven, or has been empirically disproven. The facts and reasons show these beliefs to be false, but you have to believe it. That's faith. But it has no feeling. Nous has a feeling. Phronesis has a state of self. Even the act of dianoia, real learning, has a pleasure associated with it, has a discernible consequence. You can see better. You can think clearly. You can even contemplate better. You can free yourself from your problems. It has consequences. It works. Beliefs, especially false beliefs, don't have feelings. So how do you know that you are saved? How do you know if the ladder is supposed to change your state of mind? Where is that change in feeling? So what do? They tell you to go out and proselytize, which means pronounce your opinions, pretend to be a knower without actually doing the work of knowing, cosplay as a guru. My opinions about reality are right, even though they're objectively wrong. Why do you believe them? Because my parents said so. And what's going to happen? Unless you happen to be brought up in that same family or religion, you're going to say, well, that doesn't make any sense. There's no evidence for that. That's by definition an absurd belief. We know that to be incorrect and harmful. That feeling they get when their personal beliefs are challenged, that feeling to defend the pathologos, the false beliefs, worse even than prejudices, they're more fundamental. That feeling that is our soul saying, hey, you have a injustice here on your own soul. You have been tricked to believe something that's not true. That feeling that is stimulated within your soul, that anger, that sense of injustice, that's not because of the belief, because, oh, your dear leader is so great. Your family and your priests are, they are saints. It's not their fault. It's the person challenging. Socrates was put to death because he challenged this. Socrates literally said this in the text. You will end up hating other humans because you are not realizing the true cause isn't humans, it's that you haven't learnt the art of the logos. You don't know how to think well. You don't know how to purify your false beliefs that you have been tricked into. He literally said that in the text. We read that. So what's called project. We project that sense of injustice and anger away from the true cause, our lack of the art of the logos, and our false teachers who imitated wisdom, cosplayed as knowing, but they ain't no Socrates. They don't actually know. They pretended to because everyone wants to cosplay as the knower. Redirect or project that anger onto the person who is using the logos to act with justice and blame them. And we end up hating and reviling the logos, which is the greatest defect of the soul, as Socrates pointed out, and the reason why he's being murdered right now in the text. This is important because, and by the way, that sense of anger and hatred at the injustice you suffered because you had not yet learnt the art of the logos. That's wisdom. That's what it means to be knowing. Says fascists, says conservatives, says right-wingers. That's why they love weapons and guns. It gives them a chance to enact their anger. I'm angry, who cares? But I'm angry with a gun. Well, now I care. Gets people to pay attention to your misdirected anger. Why? Because false beliefs don't have a feeling, but that sense of injustice at having a false belief, that's your soul's telling you, or your daemon maybe saying, hey, you've got some work to do, can be projected on others, blame others, and those who are manipulating the many to act against their own interests because they're exploiting them, as all fascists and capitalists and conservatives do, they will say, oh, you know what? There isn't actually a feeling of nous and wisdom and enlightenment. Enlightenment doesn't exist, but that anger you feel when people challenge your ignorance and your prejudices that we give you, that's what it means to be knowing. Self-righteous anger. That's what we will use when we invade a country and shoot up the other people who don't believe what we believe. You can be a professional opinion haver. Now, that's important because we can understand and diagnose problems in our world, but also within us. We might get a sense of anger when something like this challenges us. Well, hang on a second, that makes sense for everybody else, but not me. My dad actually was Socrates. My mum actually was loving and caring. So screw you, you swear word, you so-and-so. If I was on the jury, I'd sentence you to death with your reasoning about principles that apply to all human beings forever. Not me. I picked the real, well, I didn't pick it. My family happened to be the real wise people, and they don't need dianoia, understanding, nous, knowledge, phronesis, ? They can be professional opinion havers. We will have that because we are humans also, even though we're in the game of philosophy. That anger that certain people will trigger in us, often when they imitate or reflect the kind of injustice we suffered when we didn't have the logos because we were surviving as little babies. Didn't have the art of the logos yet. We need to understand where that comes from. That anger isn't wisdom. It is an alert that we can point to something. We can pull out key terms and state of minds, like reading a text, but reading that messages we're getting in our psyche. To apply the dialectic to purify ourselves from our false beliefs, that's philosophical midwifery. That's half of the game. The other half is doing that same thing to the text. So we want to free ourselves from our distractions, recognize that there aren't going to be any people around, apart from this channel, maybe. And of course, the Balboa translations of Socrates. And of course, this book that we're reading in our other series. Apart from those few people, there ain't going to be anybody telling you this is why we have those feelings. This is why we have those blocks. In fact, as Socrates is saying, the people who will be your teachers in society are going to be saying the opposite. Your anger is not because of your lack of the art of the logos, and is not a gift to practice the dialectic on, which is the whole reason you're alive, to master the art of dialectic on those things. It's not that. It's actually what it means to be wise and good and a man and an alpha and all that crap. It's the feeling of what it means to be wise, because they ain't got nothing else. And when they were being taught it, they were actually participating in the self or the logos when their parents or teachers came along and said, "Rawr, I hate and revile the logos that you are expressing. Not in my house, child." And instead of realizing, wow, that's a problem and injustice, I can diagnose that because I have the art of the logos, you were just a baby. So you're, wow, I love this person. They must be right. That must be what wisdom is. That anger that they are projecting on me must be a sign of wisdom. All of this makes sense when we understand simply the puzzles that Socrates are giving us. That vice is a shadow of truth. All of that is a shadow of truth. Therefore, we can make sense of injustice in our world, tyrants in our world, fascists in our world, but also in our soul when we get angry, when we reject the logos, when we want to project our anger onto others or blame others and not blame the lack of the logos to be able to judge and diagnose. When are we Trump-like? When are we Jordan Peterson-like? When are we like a angry religious person defending their false beliefs, thinking that that sense of anger is actually righteousness and a mark of wisdom, and not doing the opposite? Okay, so we've got to recognize the problem, but also recognize the paradigm. What does philosophy do? Well, we've been seeing in the text, encourages, persuades us to reflect, invites us to share in the mastering the art of the dialectic, talks in a friendly way, a noble way, a graceful way, encourages people to, because understanding isn't a matter of what group you were born into. It's not divisive. It's not my cave against your cave. Whoever is the most fascist and the most evil, not evil, the most violent wins. Like modern politics, everything up until now. Why? Because understanding is universal. Anyone can become a doctor. Anyone can master the art of the logos, provided they have language and they can reflect on themselves. That's all. That's why we're here. That's why we have problems. To have something to remind us, hey, you can't coast. You're going to have a problem. Even if you're rich, even if you're a fascist, you're going to have problems. Anger. Your psyche or your daemon telling you, hey, No, you can't accept this false belief about yourself. I won't allow it. Wake up. That would be terrible if there wasn't a way of waking up. It is so terrible to walk up to someone and say, hey, you've got a problem, wake up. I've had people tell me that in my life, and it stinks. Wake up. What the hell are you talking about? It is wrong to say wake up without offering a way of waking up. You stink. No, hang on a second. We don't do that in philosophy. There is a problem that you had. That was a solution to a certain time of your life that is preventing you from reaching your destiny and causing the suffering that you have, tying yourself, imprisoning yourself to fate. Here is what you can do. Here is the art of the logos. Here is how to read. And here is a translation, the Balboa translation of the Phaedo, that is readable. So again, only been around for the last 5 years. So if you have come across this since now, or in the last, well, before now, you must have been very lucky to come across people who can know how to read the Greek and have their own personal experiences of these higher levels of reality and have had the character and nature to understand them, to see the rationality or intelligibility in them. But those people are very few. One such person is the author of this book, of course, this fellow here. Apart from him, there weren't many avenues in. Fortunately, we have the Balboa translation. Fortunately, we have YouTube and Twitch and Patreon to share these ideas with people. So we can say wake up, but in a gentle way. Hey, we all have problems that keep us kind of like asleep. Asleep to our problems, projecting our problems, confusing our states of mind and thoughts that are messages from our psyche or daemon to help us, confusing that with actual truth. The voice that tells you that you stink or you're not good enough or you can't understand, that's not literal. That's a message to be unpacked with the dialectic to find the cause of that problem. If it wasn't there, there would be no way of maintaining the problem. That's in the text. Socrates says things should be the way that they are if mind is the cause, and there should be something maintaining it. Therefore, the inner voice or the problems or negative states of mind that we have, including the anger, need to be there for a good reason to maintain our problem so that we can have something to exercise the dialectic on, to purify from that particular false belief, to benefit us in our development into higher dimensions, escaping reincarnation and coming to the higher dimensions of reality with the art of the logos. So there is a kind of necessity for our inner critic to be there, or the negative states of mind to be there, to maintain the problem that we are here to address. Which is you can only do through the art of the logos, through the art of the dialectic. Now we can be confused by equally confused teachers who say, oh, no, that's right, that inner critic is right. You are a sinner. You do stink. You can never know the nature of the meaning of life. Or, that inner critic and those negative thoughts, actually, that's that other group's fault. The minorities, poor people. Usually it's the people who can't fight back. Or, that feeling of discontent. Not only is it not the fault of injustice or the rich or capitalism. No. It's the fault of the different colored skinned people or the different races or women Or, oh no, it's a mark of wisdom. Yeah, that's how you know when you're angry like Trump, or you're angry like this preacher getting angry at non-believers. That's what makes you wise. All of these things are to fundamentally miss the mark of why we have our problems. As Socrates says, there needs to be a good reason for it, related to our need to master the art of the logos, related to our purification, that can maintain our question. Just like in the text, we discover questions and we work to maintain them. That's a key cause. Something must maintain it. Just like in the text, he talks about phronesis. Those people in that negative category, side B, lovers of fighting and opinions, they don't have that state of phronesis or ousia. So they don't know what logos, what argument will maintain that state. Whereas somebody who has reached that state of wisdom or ousia or phronesis, not wisdom, it's a virtue, the upgraded version of wisdom, we could say, that state of self called phronesis, they can see that if they got there through the art of the dialectic and logos, they can use the art of the dialectic and logos to maintain it. One of the ways of failing to have our goals is to get our goal and not maintain it. There must be a maintaining cause. In reality, in the state of phronesis that we reach, that's why we get there through the art of the logos. But also for our problems. If being a human means you have to get a problem to learn to purify, learn the art of the dialectic in terms of purification, being a doctor doesn't just mean learning the healthy body, it means also using it to purify the sick illnesses. Then there must be something to maintain it. Our negative states of mind, the negative self-talk or inner critic, what we could call the negative daemon, it's sometimes been called. Negative because it's not true. It's a shadow, but on a higher level serves a more important purpose to maintain our problem so that we can do this work. But it ain't literal. So when you have a hatred, oh, I hate all women, that's not literal. It is, however, important. It's telling you that you are carrying a fundamental false belief or pathologos that's a shadow of truth, that's actually going to keep you addicted and trapped in fate. Vice, Socrates, it's called. But if you apply the art of the dialectic to it, you can free yourself from fate. You can free yourself from the vice shadows of virtues and recognize, hang on a second, for it to even exist, there must be principles within the soul that seeks the thing that it's a shadow of. If the shadow of beauty, if the shadow of wisdom and truth had such an effect on me, I must really be seeking truth itself. And when I reach truth itself, in the same way the shadow maintained my ignorance, hopefully the experience of real truth will maintain my wisdom, maintain my knowledge, maintain my phronesis. And of course, it would be a pretty lousy universe if we do the work of mastering the art of the dialectic and we reach nous and we integrate that into a state of self called phronesis, what we might call enlightenment. We have to use that word selectively because there are different levels of enlightenment, of course, but this kind of enlightenment, it would be lousy if it didn't maintain itself. So we need that force of, in reality, to maintain the logos of beauty and truth. For us to have a development to a goal that we can maintain, we have to maintain our state of enlightenment, even when we leave our body, even when we go out of our body into the next realm. And take it with us so we don't get stuck in the underworld, but go to the surface of the realm of being. to meet better men and fellow travelers and gods and guides. We need there to be a principle to maintain what we do here. Otherwise, why the heck are we here? You can't maintain your wealth and fame and Bugattis and qualifications and degrees on your wall out of this physical life. So we can say, well, if eternity is much longer than this physical life, those can't be the reasons or the purpose or the higher causes why I'm here. That can't be my purpose, the meaning of life, or my destiny. It has to be something that can be maintained. Socrates pointed this out in the text. There has to be a force that maintains. Let's bring it up it's important to see it. Let's bring it up in the text. So this is Socrates' second search for causes, the higher set of causes. There are physical causes, what we today call the Aristotelian causes, the material cause, the efficient cause, all that. There are four or five of them. You need a physical cause of wood to build a house. You need the blueprints to build a house. We'll get into that later. But there are physical causes, Aristotelian causes. But if it's mind that orders the cosmos and is the cause of all, then it should be best. So there's a higher kind of cause. So there's a functioning cause of mind. There is a paradigm of what we call what is best, that it should be the way it is. It's best for the world to be the way it is, including those problems we mentioned. It's proper for humans to investigate. But also, where's the word maintain? Okay, here we go. So this is the one guy who was actually curious about mind as a cause. As we said, these people are rare. I mentioned this guy who went on a similar quest. But thankfully now we have the benefit of Socrates, a rare guy, and this guy, and the internet, and the Balboa translation. So, but in Socrates' time, there was just this one guy, Anaxagoras. But he didn't realize that they have to be maintained in this way. And of course, if there are causes in a higher level or the level of being or mind, there has to be a cause for the causes. So that's we talked about today. One way of solving puzzles is realize that on one level, the Aristotelian causes or the physical causes, they are a metaphor for the higher level, just like our problems, our shadows, our vice are a shadows of the real thing. They are kind of like a metaphor for what we are seeking. What's a metaphor mean? Wow. Hang on a second, I'll be right back. All right, what's a metaphor mean? Well, it means that terms vary. So let's write metaphor up on the board. Terms vary, relations stay the same. That's the principle that allows there to be metaphors. Metaphor or analogy. So, terms vary, relations stay the same. So we've been talking about how we started by talking about how do we read. One way is Socrates will say, hey, here is a level of fish relating to the sea, relating to the sun, relating to the stars. And this will be a metaphor for a different level or dimension that's what these double dots mean, for people or surface dwellers. For people is to the air, is to something, is to something. Now this is how we look for puzzle. We have to look for the analogy. We have to look for the terms he doesn't put in. And our job in reading with a capital R is to look for these guys. Discover the things that are missing in the analogy and then look in the text for what they might be. But we said, hang on a second, you can even go even further. If you're a really good teacher like Socrates, then you can say, you've got another job, which is, to discover, hey, look, he's given us these two. He's told us that these two things exist. But, hey, just as these are not given, so too, the next level is not given. What is the next level? And on the next level, you're going to have to do all of the terms. So you've got to also discover this and all of these too. That's how we look for puzzles. So, Christopher Nolan, okay, let's use Fight Club. That's a good example. In Fight Club, there is a story of a guy and his friend, and they try and deal with the plight of capitalism, but actually it turns out the twist is these were all a metaphor for something else. He didn't really have an imaginary friend. He was relating to a different part of his psyche. And then what does this person represent? What does this thing represent? But actually, maybe you go on YouTube later on and you realize, actually, there was a whole different third level. The twist was a clue to the real twist. Okay, that's an example from modern culture. But, so in our reading, we want to know, well, hang on a second, what would be the level above this? Now, why are we talking about metaphor and analogy now? Well, we're talking about how this also applies to our problems. Our problems, for it to have the power, there must be a force or relations that maintain. Otherwise, we wouldn't keep our problems. We wouldn't have problems. They wouldn't be maintained. So this is in the text. Whoops. In the text, Socrates says, hey, there has to be a power by which the things are disposed in the way that they are. And there has to be some sort of daemonic force also that keeps things together, binds things together. Bind and hold selves together. What he mentions earlier as maintain. Where's the word maintain? Maintain. Where's the word maintain? Here we go. Maintain. Okay, so there's something maintaining them, and also Socrates points out, by the way, a daemonic force can be part of that maintaining. Just, what a curious puzzle. Why is he saying that? What a weirdo. Or maybe Okay, so there has to be a force that maintains our problems. Our problems that bind us to fate, that we have to purify. Purify. Through what? Well, it's rude to say, just wake up. No. It's like saying, oh, just don't be depressed. Just don't be ill. Just don't have a problem. That is mean. You purify through art of dialectic. So someone comes up to you and there's a I don't know, I won't talk about it. There's a game that some spiritual people play and they realize someone has a problem. They go, wake up. Just wake up, man. And of course, it can be stolen by people who don't even see a problem. They're just, oh, your opinions are different than mine. Hey, you Democrats, wake up. Anyone can say it. But we're not doing that. We are saying, hey, there's a reason for your problems that you can purify through the art of the dialectic. And there must be something maintaining it. If there is something maintaining it, we can play this game of metaphor or problem solving. Puzzle solving. Why? Because for there to be a force that maintains our problems, which is based on the shadow of truth, wisdom, and logos, then there must be the thing that it's a shadow of. That must mean that there must be a force that maintains the power of truth and the logos that we must be seeking within in our soul. So while in our reading in the Phaedo, we can gain insight about one through metaphor. So by knowing about truth and phronesis and the art of the logos, we can use metaphor to gain an insight about its shadow. That's solving a puzzle. Metaphor. Yay.
Wow.
Equally so, if you're following along in the other series on midwifery, we are literally doing this other one. And every step of the way, if there's a force or relations stay the same, that maintains the relations of these terms, then we can use it as a metaphor to understand what's the higher. Just like we understand the terms in the fish to understand the higher. What's it like from a soul who can separate from the body? And one step higher. Now, of course, we recognize these three levels are present in the altos. Self. Because the word self in the Greek has those three levels. Has the particular it, to read it in English. Particular. Has the honorific. When we say self beauty or the self earth, we're talking about it in the honorific, which is in being. So we can say becoming is the particular, being is the honorific, and maybe the one self is the highest or ultimate. So the word self that's used all throughout the text that hasn't been translated up until now, yay for us, has this puzzle built in. So whenever you come across the word altos, you know that you can put on your Sherlock Holmes cap, look for the analogy, and even look for the third level of meaning. Which is cool. Okay, so we're talking about this now because Socrates says there must be a cause for the causes. So this, by the way, this movement to a higher analogy was what Socrates did in his second search for causes. He realized that there ain't no one talking about the second, let's zoom in a little bit, the second search for causes. Even Anaxagoras, who was talking about mind must be a cause, didn't get into the realm of being. And literally, if this is what the virtues are, the art of the dialectic, which is applied to understanding the paradigm, being, reaching being, understanding the logos and how it informs the world of becoming, which exists in being, then you can't be a philosopher until you do this second search for causes. But true to this game of giving puzzles, Socrates mentions but doesn't elaborate the third level of causes. Just as he said, by the way, you can escape the cycles of reincarnation. That sounds pretty good, but then there's a level above that I'm not going to mention right now. Why? Because that's how you give a puzzle. You say, hey, the fish and the sea is like the people in the air, to talk about how we can understand and maybe free ourselves from reincarnation. But even when we're free of reincarnation and we're in that sixth dimension with better men and gods who are fellow travelers and guides, they are going somewhere. I'm not going to talk about it now. Of course you're not. You're not supposed to. We are supposed to do that. Just like he's talking about the self-earth in that example. So he's talking about the earth, and then he calls it the self-earth. He literally uses the word altos. He's teaching us in this last analogy, the self-earth. He's saying, hey, there is a different level of the earth that you won't see because you're like a fish. You think the fish earth that you see through your physical senses is the real one. But if you can separate yourself from the body by doing what you're supposed to be doing while you're here, true philosophy, the art of the dialectic, you will see that the earth has a different shape and size. Literally. Let's find it in the text. Hey, the earth, there is a self, here's the word self, there is a self of earth, altos of earth, is pure and laid up in the pure heavens where the stars are established. So here's a clue about stars, which will play into our analogy later. So there's a clue. Stars are in the pure earth, in the pure heaven. So what we might call being. And we have to become winged and fly. But here we go. Talk about the earth in regards to her nature and size. It's not like how I have been persuaded, like our people in our world who claim to be teachers talk about it. Simia says, well, hang on, I've heard stuff about the size of our earth too. Please share. That's the final boss that we are preparing for. To make sense of his analogy of the self-earth. Why is he talking about it? Well, here we say, hey, I am going to talk about the self-earth, but if we're in the game, we realize that there is that third level of unpacking a metaphor. The one he doesn't give us. So the word self means the particular earth, talking about the earth itself, not the people on earth, the earth itself, but the self-earth means, hey, this one that's actually in being, laid among the heavens and where the stars are from, but also there must be the third level of causes. As we just read, there must be a cause for even causes. I'm not going to get into it. That's what he does. He says, hey, there's a third level. I'm not going to even tell you what it is. You have to puzzle about it. That's your job. That's what you're here for. What's he doing? He's maintaining the problem by not ruining it by sticking an arrow in it, popping the balloon.
Wow.
There has to be a force to maintain it. I'm not going to tell you what is beyond the realm of being that these guys are heading towards, the guys free from reincarnation, because they've been doing the dialectic, the job. I'm not going to talk about the third level of causes, but I'll say that Anaxagoras and everybody else, they don't recognize there must be a higher level, so that's why I've got to do it myself. We could even say, hey, in this art of the dialectic, that's our perfection and purification, there's a force maintaining both. Could there be even a cause of that? Is that our third level that we will uncover? I don't know. But it's the same puzzle solving technique. Now, Socrates in the text talks about when he's talking about the causes, it has to be maintained in this way. Here is this has to, the thing that maintains it is where is it? A bit further on. Okay, look, here is a cause is one entity in reality, in being, so recognizing that the causes are in being, mind itself, the true earth in heaven, the self-earth, honorific. But that, the good isn't there, but the translator recognizes, that third level, because Juan Balboa has done a lot of work in philosophy himself. But that without which a cause could never be a cause is another. That's our third level of causes. But he also talks about the thing that keeps them disposed in the possible, that force and power that maintains has to have a daemonic force. So that's another clue. So let's go back. Socrates is maintaining a puzzle. He's not telling us about the third level of causes. He's not telling us about the third level of earth. He is maintaining it. What is Socrates saying is that force, that the power and force that maintains he calls it daemonic, like the daemon. Daemon-like. Now, this is interesting because we have just said Socrates is maintaining a question for us. And we've just said we need to have a question because that makes us curious. That gives us something to apply the dialectic to. That gives us a final boss that we are training for. So you could say Socrates in this text is being daemon-like himself, which is actually in the text right at the start, page 5, one of the very first things we said in the text was Phaedo said that Socrates appeared like a good daemon in his disposition and logos. Socrates is described as a good daemon. And we have one assigned to our soul to help us. There's people who have vices or have the virtues without the art of the dialectic are not the most good daemons. if we can cease from our wandering by separating from the body, and we truly are practicing philosophy correctly, which is practicing to die. We're not dragging around things of the body. If we abide in this way, we make our way to the formless, that true earth, which is like ourself, the higher self, the honorific, the divine and deathless and phronesis, which upon arriving, self will be a good daemon, having rid from the wandering of ignorance, fear, and wild desires, and other human defects. So when we purify, we become like a good daemon ourselves. This is a kind of initiate, and if you have this kind of initiation, you will truly spend the rest of time with the gods. That's page 41, and all the way at page 90 something, we realize, that he is talking about separating from the fifth dimension, or the cycle of reincarnation, to spend time eternally with the gods, better men and gods. That's daemon-like. So Socrates is described as daemon-like, but now we can see more about it. Like, so if we're being told, hey, you need to separate from cycles of reincarnation, you need to become daemon-like, our question should be, well, how the heck do we do it? He is saying how important it is. And also it goes on, people who are claimed to be daemon-like but have the vices aren't. They're not going to escape. They're going to come back as a bee or an ant. So he's outlining the importance and the stakes if we don't, but he hasn't told us how to be a daemon. That's a question. We have to maintain that question. By the way, it seems from our reading that if we maintain our question like we have been practicing doing, we are becoming daemon-like. There's one answer to that question. The big one, how do we become daemon-like? This seems to be the key to the whole text. Well, one way is to maintain a question. Discover these questions, which means understanding how metaphor works. When you see something in the world of becoming, search for the cause. You see many beautiful things. What's the cause? What's beauty itself in the honorific, in being? But also, hey, what's the cause of even that? That movement from to a higher level of analogy or metaphor, that's called anagogic, upward moving, anagogic thinking. So, maintain your questions. You are doing your job, becoming daemon-like. Also, Socrates is maintaining this by giving us half of a metaphor here, so we've got to fill it out. So there's one question. He's not giving us even what the third level is, so that's an even higher question. So Socrates is being daemon-like to us. He is helping us through time. He is like a daemon helping our souls. Also, as above, so below. Our problems, if they're, by the way, another time that we've used the expression maintain contention, I think. Yeah, another time we've seen something to do with maintaining is its opposite. And of course, if we want to do an understanding and the dialectic, you got to do what it isn't. These people who are unenlightened and have a love of fighting, the Trumps, the Tates, the Petersons, as we've been talking about today, the people who are contentious to get likes and then try and translate that into convincing others, convincing those present that they have got through their contentiousness, that what they say is true. Here, what we can call professional opinion havers, red pill networks and stuff like that. Okay? Those who are not actual philosophers, but the opposite, lovers of fighting, debating, they are unenlightened. Should highlight that. But also, when they engage in argument about anything, they will in no way care whether or not the logos under discussion maintains mindfulness. Phronesis to ousia. Phronesis and ousia. Because they don't have it. Thumbs up. Literally, they are on the level of opinions. Ousia is beyond even, like you got to go from opinion to true learning, the trust in the logos and the repetition and practice of the logos. Not just education, nurture too. Not just definition, demonstration too. Doing this, subscribing, watching these podcasts, doing it yourself. That's true learning. And even then, that's not true philosophy until you're practicing the dialectic, doing the training. That's this one here. And that is the ticket to phronesis or enlightenment. And because we've got there through the art of the logos or the dialectic, we can see whether or not the logos under discussion maintains that state of mind. So if we are in that state of nous, knowing, we have integrated because we've been practicing it as much as we can at all times. And we have an understanding, we got there through the art of the logos, that nous, virtue, and logos come together for phronesis. That will allow us to maintain it. So we can be daemon-like to ourselves. So our job to be like Socrates, who has done his work and he knows where he's going and he can trust where he's going, he's happy to be where he's going. We've got levels of the daemon. We've got, of course, at the end, so we've got a true philosopher uses phronesis and ousia, state of self, with logos, what we are also calling the art of the dialectic, to maintain that state, the state that we need to maintain to take with us in this life and the next and beyond. We have Socrates, maintaining our questions, puzzles that we need. We need to practice. It's a practice or nurture or demonstrate, using the language of the dialectic. Demonstrate the art of the dialectic. So these are two levels of daemon, to be daemon-like. We can be daemon-like. Socrates is being daemon-like. Is that pretty cool? So daemons are super important, especially because it was dropped in at the start. The structure is important, the text. But let's jump ahead to right at the end where we are, to the final boss. right before the final boss of the true earth that we have to somehow gain puzzles on and then apply the art of the dialectic to. That would be the training we're here for in our life, in our reincarnations, and in the text as he is helping us to figure out. Therefore, that's why we're going back and we're going to train up our art of the dialectic so we can go back and face this boss. He's too overpowered for us right now. But right before he introduces this final boss of the true earth, the self-earth, he gives us an overview of the daemon. So that's how important it is. So this is the 12-sided ball. Rivers of the afterworld. Here we go. There is not one single path to the realm of being. And it has come to light for me. So, an interesting expression that he's repeating. I don't know what this come to light means, but I have seen it. It's in a funny color. It's been repeated. So there's going to be some significance in it. That's another question we're carrying. Why does he say come to light in these certain places? That will be something we'll have to weave together maybe a bit later. It's come to light that there's not a simple path leading to the realm of being, or even one path, for then there would be no need for guides. Yeah, if anybody can become wise, some people say, oh, you know what makes you wise? Experience. Just any path you walk, you will learn. That's why all old people are so wise like Socrates. Of course not. There would be no need for Socrates being daemon-like if that were true. No need for guides, for there would be no way anyone could miss the mark if there was only one path. There's lots of ways you might say, well, there needs to be one path, because how can we harmonize our soul on a single focus to get the virtues, to get the power of a single focus, to develop the art of the dialectic? Isn't that a single path? Sure, but there are many problems that we can have in our life that can deviate, that we have to therefore address to get onto this journey towards the truth, the self-earth, singular. So, and if every human didn't have a different problem, we wouldn't need guides. There are many branches and circuits. I report this from my own sacred rites. I have seen them. I had a look. Well, that's what the souls are doing. Oh, interesting. Lots of different paths these people are taking. And the sure signs of the common laws. What's that? That's a puzzle. We can speculate. The common laws would be the logos that would apply to our physical world, maybe. The sure signs, the predictability. He mentioned the prophecy that you get from Apollo being the god of philosophy. So maybe his nous with the art of the logos. Maybe. Don't know. It's a hypothesis. We keep the question alive. We maintain the question. We try and understand it. We create our loftiest, highest vision hypothesis, as Socrates told us to do. Let's touch on that again. Lofty. He said we. Okay, don't reason like other people do. People who claim to be wise. Give their sophisticated answers, what we call gatekeeping maybe. Oh, well, Hegel said and Nietzsche said, and there was, in the time of this recording, there was an interview between Jordan Peterson and one of the people we mentioned, and Elon Musk, one of the most unjust people, being a dragon, exploiting people for his own personal wealth, and then sitting on it like a dragon sits on a mountain of gold. And we can say it's unjust because wealth is relative. If one person is becoming rich, it means everyone else is becoming poor. Rich isn't having $1 million, it's having $1 million when everyone else has $10. If everyone had $1 million, it wouldn't make you rich. We have to realize this. Wealth is relative. So if there are billionaires, they are exploiting the money to people to get that money, and they are actively harming harming others by being rich. It makes others poor. By definition, that's why capitalism is innately unjust. Okay, we need to realize this. It's relative. Also, capitalism is exploiting. Where do you get that money from? You know. Anyway, so these two sort of personifications, mythological representations of the sorts of people we're talking about: Philokrematos, lovers of riches, and Peterson, you know, Philonikos, lovers of contention, anti-logos people who think that wisdom is from convincing others of their own personal opinions. Or we could say Philotimos, lovers of fame. So the two parts of the non-philosophers, two types, lovers of riches or lovers of fame. We're a mix of two, but they kind of represent both. Anyway, they had a conversation and it was remarkably weird. It was so weird because they talked in this sophisticated way. By mixing the dry with the wet, they would change topics. They would talk about causes, but then effects. They would use these big words. Well, I read Nietzsche, and therefore, in order to justify their wealth. There's no reason why Elon Musk should have all of the money and the world should be his playground while other human beings suffer. He has to justify it. And his way of justifying is say, oh, I'm smarter. I'm innately smarter than everyone else. Therefore, and Jordan Peterson will say, yes. And people, and there are natural hierarchies based on this, based on being more dominant, like lobsters. And therefore, if you can exploit people, you deserve to be higher up the hierarchy. Now, we can recognize that's a shadow of the true hierarchy of the logos. So these people kind of fit together really nicely. But Elon Musk has to justify his ridiculous, unjust wealth, which harms humanity and everyone else, by being sophisticated in his answer. He said, oh, well, I read Nietzsche when I was 7 years old, and I don't know what he said. He said something like, when I was 14, I read Spinoza or something like that. I didn't understand it. I read these texts. He's lying. He's lying to sound sophisticated, to gatekeep thought. That's what Peterson does. He also mixes the dry. Okay, look. Don't mix the dry with the wet, just as the anti-logos or controversialists do by discussing cause and their effects at the same time. That won't help you reach being. So Socrates is literally describing this conversation that's going to happen 2,500 years later. But we have to do the opposite. What's that? Okay? Don't gatekeep, but instead do this. Create a hypothesis. Your best one from your loftiest hypothesis, your loftiest vision and understanding. Okay? Follow the consequences that follow. Are they concordant or discordant with one another? Hypothesize another one. Put another one in your inventory, in your hypothesis set. Carry both. See what comes to light as best out of all of them. See if they're sufficient. Now, the word sufficient has special meaning for us to do with moving from dianoia to nous and to ousia and phronesis. Don't mix the dry with the wet like the anti-logos people do to try and sound smart and justify their fame or their wealth, like Musk and Peterson. You won't reach the beings that way. So he's outlining what we are doing in this game. And we are creating a hypothesis as we go, carrying it with us. The loftiest one we can make, take many, see what happens, see what follows. And one such hypothesis is to make sense of the sacred rites and sure signs. someone with the virtues and phronesis would follow their guide and be aware of their problems, their present circumstances, why they're in this life, why they had the problems they had, what the path is and circuit they're on is for. They'll be aware of it. So midwifery, along with what we're doing. But if the soul is passionately attached to the body, you will fearfully flutter around the body and the visible place. You will struggle much, you'll suffer much, and you'll have to be led away with difficulty by your appointed daemon. And then he talks about the daemon needing, so as a guide through our life, it's supposed to help us. It can be hard to listen to. The more we're attached to the body, we're not practicing, nurturing, demonstrating the virtues to try and separate from our physical senses and desires as much as we can, to instead take pleasure in this amazing, fun, awesome game.
Wow.
So that's the daemon. So now we have 3 kinds of daemons so far given in the text. We've got Socrates maintaining our questions and puzzles that we need to practice and nurture the dialectic on through, how is he doing it? Through his art. Through his art, which is using analogy, using the dialectic, giving the puzzles. So we are hypothesizing again that all the puzzles will follow the structure of the dialectic. So we can use the dialectic to unpack his puzzles. That's our hypothesis. And today our new hypothesis was this amazing new way of reading may be within the dialectic itself. So his art might point to the dialectic and give us stuff to practice the dialectic on. And that whole activity itself might be contained within the dialectic, the art of reading in this magnificent way, rolling on our questions, tying things together, looking for questions, maintaining questions, developing hypothesis. Hey, the dialectic is an if, it's a hypothesis. If A and if B. And once you go through it once, you have more material to do it again. So you develop lots. So maybe this art of reading is a dialectic. Okay? And also, it's something we have to read. I mean, it's something we have to discover. Dr. Grimes would say, he was someone who also mastered this art and discovered this art and discovered how this art applies to solving problems. So he did all this himself, just like Socrates. And he was told that he was a guru and he was the Dharma successor, next in line, and the one of the 8 lines of Buddhism, the Korean Buddhist tradition, to be the next Dalai Lama or whatever they're called. And he would say, I am just teaching people how to read. So what we are doing, we're learning how to read. Now, hidden within that just teaching people how to read might be this dialectic, because that might be how to read. And we don't do this at school. At school, we do the opposite. Literally, as Socrates says, the experts are going to be doing the opposite. What did the book mean to you? That's literally interpretation. There's no mention of the matching the mind of the author. No. What did the author try to say? And can we use the art of the dialectic to judge how good was his vision and his understanding of the vision? What level was he on? And how much influence did his problem have on him? That's reading. Using the art of the dialectic to judge. Not adding what isn't in the text or leaving out what is there. That's interpretation. That's what we learn at school. That's why we're learning a new thing. Okay? So now we've got 3 kinds of daemon. Now we've got the guide for allotted guide. Allotted guide. Guiding spirit for our soul for this lifetime. So now we have the literal daemon. So this literal daemon should have a power and force that maintains our purpose, our quest, our reason for being here, our destiny. So we've got Socrates functioning like a daemon, maintaining our questions by using his art to give us the understanding of the dialectic, but not literally giving us work to do to figure it out. We have someone who has a philosopher himself and has reached ousia, can use that state of the self to maintain their own state, so they're a kind of daemon to themselves. We've got the allotted spirit that for our soul, which must be guiding us through the many branches and circuits. Let's write that. Through the many branches and circuits. So to our destiny, so that's this, a force or relationship that maintains the relations, how we relate to the different terms in the world, guiding us to here. But as we see, as above, so below, our job is to apply the dialectic to see what if this is side A, what is side B? That's part of problem solving. And we can see, oh, hang on a second, that's kind of like this. The fish is like the people. The lower level is like the higher level. Oh, hang on a second. What are we also doing? We're also carrying in mind, how can we, let's write this down. We've got this huge question with us. Big question. Big question that we are carrying with us, making us daemon-like. Making us daemon-like. Which is, how can we see our puzzle solving or reading with a capital R in the dialectic? This is a big one.
Wow. I don't want to eat a monkey.
I don't want to eat a monkey. I want to know this. Okay. So one such way is, well, this is problem solving. Looking for the lesser and see it in the greater. And also see it in the ultimate, by the way. Hang on a second. Or that's use of analogy for puzzle solving. Terms vary, relations stay the same. So we're saying, okay, if this is the higher version, can we see this daemon functioning in Socrates? Can we see it in how we are reading, or in what the ideal philosopher is? And can we see it in our own reading? So got this one. So let's write what we are doing. We just said we're going to be daemon-like by maintaining our questions. We maintain our questions as we read. So we are being daemon-like to ourselves. We have the description of the philosopher who's achieved phronesis, being a daemon to themselves. Socrates using the art to be a daemon to us. We are trying to match Socrates and also maintaining our own questions, so we are being daemon-like. We have the ideal daemon here. So what are we doing? We're looking at different different terms, same relations. What's the relationship? Maintaining something important, needed for our highest quest. That's daemon-like. And we have a daemon spirit that maintains its relation with us so that we can maintain our quest towards our ultimate goal. But hang on a second. We were talking about if this is the ladder up, it must have a shadow for our vices to chain us to fate, for our problems that stink, but that are terrible, but because we suffer them, but we don't have to suffer them if we can realize that they have a higher purpose. To give us something that we can practice the art of the dialectic on, not just to master the part of the art that is perfection, but master the part of the art that's purification. A doctor needs to do both, doctor of the soul. We might call this personal training, a healthy body taken to excellence. This might be being a medical doctor, a sick body removing its problems, but we want to be both. We want to have the art of the soul. So what are we doing? We're taking A and seeing if the dialectic is to side B of the dialectic. If it isn't, if philosophy doesn't exist, if the logos doesn't exist, if vices don't exist, what are we doing? We are going to solve a puzzle. Is there, but hang on a second, we are carrying with us the question, how can we see our puzzle solving within the dialectic? What we just did, can we see the dialectic representing that? Yes. How? Wouldn't you say this is side A of the dialectic, if truth is, and this is side B, if it isn't? It's not an absence of truth. If it doesn't exist, if it doesn't exist in being, it's just the shadow. So yes, we can see that in our puzzle solving in the highest way, we are actually doing the dialectic. We can see the dialectic in our puzzle solving, which is fantastic. And maybe some confetti. Balloons only. Where's my confetti? Where's my confetti? We're gonna get closer. Yay, confetti.
Wow. 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 Wow.
Okay, so what are we doing? Side A and B. If there is a daemon allotted to our soul that we are being like, Socrates is being like, the ideal philosopher is like to himself. If there is a daemon helping us stay on this, there must be a negative version, a side B version. Can we recognize within ourselves a negative daemon, an inner voice or guide that keeps us stuck on our gosh darn problems? Whenever we seek our highest goals, is there something that says, you are not good enough? She is too beautiful for you. Nobody likes you. You can't reach that goal. You could never be that. Set a lower goal for yourself. Follow someone else instead of being a leader. Follow the many. There is no meaning in life. All of these sorts of things, yes, that's what it means to have a problem. And that's half of the game of being human. This, purifying our problems and perfecting or remembering the truth. We need to do both. Therefore, if this is so important, there has to be some force to maintain that relationship with our problem. Otherwise, we can just not have a problem and never master the art of dialectic and never free ourselves from incarnation, never develop the art we need to take with us to the sixth dimension. Just not have a problem. Easy. Like people who say, hey, just don't have a problem. Just don't be depressed. Hey, just be enlightened. Just wake up. Nonsense. Why? Because there's something that's maintaining our problems. We call it a negative daemon. Sometimes it's called the inner critic. The negative, but we recognize that there is a logos and there's a state of mind. It's the pathologos, by the way. It's negative states of mind, by the way. But there has to be something that maintains it. That's kind of working in conjunction with the positive daemon. Our dreams seem to do both. Well, our dreams give us information about the cause of our problems, but there has to be something to maintain our problems. Otherwise, we wouldn't be focused on it. We wouldn't be interested in it. We wouldn't have a problem to overcome. It would be a crummy video game or crummy movie if the hero didn't have any difficulties to overcome. Literally, if you ever do screenwriting or anything like that, you know that there has to be problems for the main character to overcome. Which means there has to be something maintaining their problem. That we can call the negative daemon, which is louder. But the more we practice what we're learning in the art of the dialectic, the more we become daemon-like to ourselves, and also the more like the positive daemon we become, the more able we will be to perceive that which we are like. As we saw, the law says the pure joins with the pure. That's one of the common laws. So you have to enter the realm of being in the pure way, so we can be in communion with the divine company and the pure and uniform. And he even said that's a principle of reality. Wait, let's find that as the principle in the text. If we're attached to the body, we're dizzy and as if we were drunk, we wander about. That's where our problems come from, attachment to the body. But we want to be pure. We want to pass into the realm that is pure and eternal and deathless. But he said that there's actually a law that the pure must join with the pure. Maybe let's try impure. Maybe he phrased it in the negative, which he... Okay, let's try law. It is not lawful to enter the genius of the gods without having practiced philosophy and being perfectly pure upon departing. So that's the law. So this is a principle of reality, or the logos. So as we saw, one of the principles of reality is, or principles of the logos or dialectic, is this thing of analogy. Side A is like side B but different, which is needed for analogy. Another principle of analogy is likeness. There are some things that are same that you look for, but same things that are different. Same relations, different terms, more or less. To have a mixture of same and different is likeness. But also, so this likeness is a principle, but it's also a principle not just for the unfolding into other realities, but for our return. We are becoming like a daemon. So that's needed for our return. But it's therefore it's a law. Here we go. Page 17. 67b. It is not lawful for that which is not pure to enter that which is pure. Hooray, we found it. Oh, and it's the conclusion. So that's important. It's the conclusion or the synthesis of his doctrine. Therefore, this we repeat and believe. This is the true doctrine. This is repeating and believing this, risking this as a belief, and repeating it is what it means to be a true lover of learning. So, likeness. We are becoming like the daemon. And therefore, the more like the positive daemon, the less attached to the body, so we're not being led by the daemon by force, the more we can listen to the daemon. And the less we are attached to our drunken wanderings with our human ills and our fearfulness and our suffering, all of the things that describe being in a gosh darn problem. The more you are alleviated from your physical body, your physical senses, and your physical desires, the less you are wandering around drunk, the less impure you are. Therefore, the more like the true daemon you are. So the less this negative daemon's voice will influence you, or you'll believe it, and the more you can hear the actual daemon that you've been allotted to in your life. And the more like Socrates you'll be, and the more like a philosopher you'll be. So that's our practice. We're not just learning this, we have to practice it. Do our best to encourage ourselves, encourage your friends, to nurture it, to practice it. It's going to be different and weird, but try it. Risk it. Spend a lifetime doing this and see if it's worth it, kind of thing. But we have reason to trust it. And a reason we can understand. And that understanding we can verify. So we can understand we have a negative daemon. And the more Peterson and Musk and Trump and all of those people who manipulate culture are attached to the love of riches, the love of fame, or, which are the two aspects of love of the body, the more they will be suffering by the negative daemon, and the less able to hear the real daemon that they will be able to. The less able to hear the real daemon that they are. They will be less able to hear the real daemon, which is a problem. But, hey, they're on their path. We can do it for ourselves. We can recognize when we are listening. Now, this force, as Socrates said, has to be the way it is. It's more just. It has to be. So when we looked at maintaining, go back into the text. There's a power with a daemonic force to keep things bound the way that they are. But it has to be good that it is the way they are. It has to be more just and beautiful. It has to be the very best for self and the common good for it to be maintained in this way. What does that mean? Well, even though that negative daemon is lying to us, it's lying to us in a certain way that gives us the metaphors, the terms and relations to, if we practice the art of the dialectic on it, to gain an insight about our specific branch or circuit, the specific problem that we are on in this life. So it ain't literal. Don't believe the negative daemon. Instead, understand it and relate to it with the art of the dialectic. Because that's its purpose. That's why it's good and just. Otherwise, you wouldn't have a force, a daemonic force, maintaining your problem. But also, this was the one time the dialectic was mentioned in the text. When we are in a problem, we have something guiding us in the negative way, away from mastering the art of the dialectic. We have a reasoning part that's different from those desires that can therefore reason with it. So you are not your desires, you are not your body, you are something else that can reason with it. Or rather, there are at least two things. You might be a third thing that has a reasoning mind that's different from the physical body and desires. But that's that third level. At any rate, Socrates says, hey, does it appear the opposite way to what people say, that we are just our body? In fact, we rule the affections of the body, which we are composed of. This is Socrates in response to the idea, hey, there is no soul. It's just a byproduct of our physical body. We are just our pleasures. We are just the neurons of our brain. A common belief even today. But it's different. We rule the affections of the body that we are said to be composed of. We oppose nearly all of our physical desires. All throughout life, we master their ways. Sometimes we correct. So here is how artfully we respond to our problems. We correct with harsh and suffering. That's one way of being. Like harsh physical training or medical treatments as a metaphor. Sometimes more gently, you might use threats. Don't do this or else. But sometimes the best time is you advise by having a dialectical conversation with the desires, the angers, and the fears, as if she were one resource talking to another. These were the things we talked about at the start of today's episode. The desires, the angers, and fears. These are the things that people who are being manipulated through opinion and belief or faith, thank you for joining on Twitch, say are knowledge, because belief doesn't have a feeling. But if you are proselytizing, if like Mormons are going knock door to door, hey, would you like to hear my dumb opinions? I'm a 16-year-old. I know nothing about anything really. All I know is my strict religious upbringing. But I believe them because my mum and dad were great. Yours were wrong, by the way. Would you like to hear me tell you about the nature of the soul and the afterlife? Says every 16-year-old Mormon that is forced to go knocking door to door. No, of course not. There are so many reasons why what you said is absurd that I don't even know where to start. That person can be afraid. Oh my God, what? I thought everyone should think this way. They might be anger. How dare you challenge my beloved parents who were the best Mormons in the Mormon village? I have a desire to act like I know more than you. These are the feelings that you can get with faith because you don't have the feeling of nous or phronesis. They reject it. You can't have knowledge. You can only just believe what we tell you, says every fascist, says every religious, because religion means to be bound by belief. We seek understanding, or we seek true learning, which is a higher trust beyond belief. And we seek the mastery of the dialectic, understanding, way better than belief and even trust. And then even beyond that, we seek nous, which is even better, directly confirm through direct experience of the immortal, of the nature of the divine. But even beyond that, we need to go somewhere. So, of course, there are much higher levels of reality. Of course, the most enlightened people aren't 16-year-old Mormons grown up in that cult. Of course. That's obvious. Might not be obvious to them. Might not be obvious to people who haven't been able to read the Phaedo until now. No, I'm laughing because we just talked about how Spinoza, Hegel, Kant, all these other people are not worth reading until we first know the paradigm through which to judge them. It's not worth gathering their opinions until we have mastered the art ourselves. It's like if you want to become a doctor and someone comes, hey, have you ever met tuberculosis? Well, now hang on a second. I can't really, I don't know what would be the cause of tuberculosis. I don't know why it would be an illness until I first know the paradigm. That's what we're learning here, to be a daemon, have the art. Now, down the line, sure, it can be fun to read Spinoza, to read Hegel, to read Kant, to get into the Vedic scriptures, to get into all of the different other traditions, to see how far they have come based on their development. What is their highest vision of reality, or what's their highest vision of the dialectic? What's their understanding of the dialectic? Both of those are the two rails of the ladder up. But also, if you're a human being, if you're a Spinoza or a Hegel or anybody, you also have a problem. So we need to also recognize what level did his problem come in. To do that, we need to first master the paradigm. That's why we start with Socrates. He's literally giving us the paradigm that was suppressed by, political forces, Emperor Justinian, which shut down the academy. Socrates was himself killed before he could pass on the complete art of the dialectic to Plato. But it doesn't matter. We can pick it up now. We have the text. We can solve the puzzles. We can do it. But so that's an answer to your question. But what did you see? Was there something that was inspiring or interesting or motivating that you saw in your reading of Spinoza? I don't mean to, if you found it interesting, I don't mean to rubbish that. Of course, there might be something inspiring or a question. Did he give you a question that you've been holding on to? What did you see? Okay, so for us, we're recognizing, by the way, it gives more understanding for sure, reading Greeks first, sure. Right. Oh, that's great. That's great. He holds kind of Aristotle and Plato together. That's interesting because one of the things we're doing today is recognizing that it's the same dialectic that you apply to mastering the art of dialectic or philosophy or excellence as you apply to your problems. And there must be a negative daemon maintaining our problems. But our job is to apply the dialectic to both. And what we just saw here is the one time the word dialectic was used, which is often a hint, the one key that opens the greatest door in the video game, or the one enemy, whatever, not enemy, more like a key, is you dialectic with the desires, angers, and fears. Now, we talked about how people who still seek to be wise and knowing, but don't have the art of the dialectic, they don't even know it exists because, it's been buried for 2,500 years, really. And we have been in the tradition of Aristotle, which is opposed to this. He's in the physical world only. That's one of the turning points. And we'll get into that a little bit later on in this episode too. So the people who, like the fascists or the Trump people who don't have any art but want to pretend they do, if belief doesn't have a feeling, they associate those desires, angers, and fears. Oh, that must be what it means to be true, to have a true belief. That must be the indication that you have faith. So when they send 17-year-old Mormons around, they get angry, they get afraid, they desire to be wise like their pastor. They'll say, oh, that's what it means to be holy. That's the virtue of faith. Now we recognize what they're doing is they're pedestalizing or turning into a virtue their vice. Those are literally evidence of problems. Angers, fears, and desires are indications through our psyche or the negative daemon that we have to apply the art of dialectic to purify ourselves from them. But if someone says, I am wise because I'm Donald Trump, I have never mastered Plato or the art of the dialectic, I have not actually understood the good, but I will claim that I am because I will say there is no such thing as truth. So I'll lie every second sentence. Or there is no such thing as an art. Anybody can be president, right? Just like anybody can fly a plane. You don't have to go to aviation school and learn the art. But what is the feeling? Because they don't actually think that. There has to be something that makes them better. So in that there has to be something that makes Trump feel like he can be president. There must be something that makes Elon feel like he deserves to have all the money while everyone else starves. There must be something that makes Jordan Peterson feel like he knows the truth while other people don't. The anger, the fear, and desire, that's what all fascists and con artists pedestalize. That's why they send the kids door to door. That's why they send religious people to evangelicalize That's why debates don't work. You become more firmly entrenched with your ignorance because you're just angry at people now. But what do the fascists do? Oh, that's why you need a gun, so people listen to your anger. Otherwise, who cares if you're angry about immigrants? But the second part is, hey, the anger isn't because you haven't mastered the art of the dialectic and therefore applied it to your problem. The anger is other people. Therefore, go to war. Therefore, hate minorities. Therefore, vote Republican. Therefore, support the fascists. Therefore, become a Nazi. Become a white supremacist. That anger, fear, and desire is what it means to be manly and alpha. Check out those alpha red pill podcasts, and they're all like, yeah, oh, I hate women, and being a man means to punch another man. It's all bollocks. It's the anger, fear, and desire. Now, that's the shadow. 'Cause that's all they have. That's the only state of mind that they can have. So they point to that as being a mark of truth, when it's the exact opposite, the shadow. Socrates is telling us through 2,500 years of time, this is what you're facing right now. So what should we be doing? Should we be using harsh suffering to correct it? Should we be using threats to correct it? Or should we be using the dialectic like a daemon? Not identifying with our angers, fears, and desires, but as if we were one resource, are different from our body, different from those negative states of mind, different from the negative daemon maintaining our problems, as if we were different from it, but talking to it. Practicing the art of the dialectic. Wow. That's what it's for. But if we don't have the art of dialectic, we can understand what follows. We can make, oh, you're a Trump, you're a Elon Musk, you're a Jordan Peterson. You think that your problems are actually signs that you are wise. Because you don't have the art of dialectic. Because you grew up without Socrates, following more Aristotle's thinking. Materialism. There is no actual understanding, it's all opinion. Or there is no realm of being, there's just the physical world. Aristotelianism, materialism. Thinking there's just the physical. And there is no art. Because then wouldn't everyone be learning it? Yes, they should. But we didn't listen to Socrates, but we can now. That's why it's important. Now, we need to take all this with us in our back pocket. You felt, oh, I don't mean to criticize you personally. There is a reason we've only had a text with the key words that we can solve the puzzle with in the last 5 years. Every translation of Socrates' words have been hilariously wrong. We haven't had the word dialectic and logos and phronesis. We haven't had the word ontos or self. All of the key words. So every time someone's read this book, unless they're a master of ancient Greek and a master of this philosophy, so they're spiritual and an academic in ancient Greek, we have never been able to listen to him. Even Plato. Socrates died before Plato was, like when he was like 20 something, which was why he couldn't apply the dialectic to do midwifery or heal Aristotle from his problem. He just kicked him out or let him leave. When Aristotle was missing the whole mark of philosophy, getting the exact wrong understanding. So there's a reason. It's not a blame game. But for whatever reason, you and anybody else watching this podcast has done something good in their life or in their past lives to come across, to be born at a time and a place where they can actually read Socrates' words and realize there is something called the art of the dialectic. They can read, they can go back through these episodes that are all free on YouTube, and they can realize, oh, it's all about mastering the art of the dialectic. And also, we can learn how we read. We're learning to read. We're learning how to solve problems. You are a materialist. I think everything... Okay, that's great. That's where we start. We start by seeing through the senses. But if you go through the previous episodes of this, you'll see Socrates saying, yeah, that's where I started too. We all start. And then you have to learn what true learning is. And then you have to realize that that's just a doorway into true philosophy, or dianoia, the art of dialectic. And even that's a doorway into something beyond. There is a realm of being. That's the cause, his second search for causes. That is knowable. If you realize what true philosophy is, the practice of separating your soul from your physical senses, what we call death. So going back to the text, the true practice of philosophy is the practice of death and dying. Philosophers are engaged in the business of death. But the problem is, most people don't know why they are deserving of death. And they don't know what kind of death it is, the way that they're engaged in death. For death is separating of the soul from the body. And if there is a knowable realm of being that's the cause of the physical world of becoming, change, then you can't see it through the physical senses. So true philosophy is to separate from the physical senses, eating, drinking, physical stimulation, sexual stimulation, buying clothes, shoes, ornaments for the body. True philosopher disdains these things, but tries to turn around their soul, ousia, to the realm of being. Right. Oh, okay. So you've got another level of difficulty. Well, you've come into an interesting puzzle. You can find the link to the text below for free. You can find these videos. You can join the Discord. The videos are all on YouTube. We live stream, so you can ask questions in real time. But I recommend going back over the previous series. It takes time, but it's fun. And the important thing is realizing that this is new. It has been suppressed. It's old, but it's new for us. Socrates is saying, I need to pass on the most important thing, that which you can use to not just believe there is a meaning of life, not just have good reasons to trust the logos. The logos is the understanding that's in reality, but can yourself understand it in a special kind of way we call dianoia. Make it your own. And that understanding, which is already several layers above what we learn at school, is a doorway into something called nous, the separation of the soul from the body, so the soul can grasp truth. And of course, there might be a level beyond that, but we want to learn this as an art. That's what we're going to be practicing. And you've come actually in a good time, because after today, the next episodes, we're going to be going back to the key. There are 4 arguments for the immortality of the soul. And then there are 2 counterattacks from popular religious or cultural myths. And we're going to apply the dialectic to understanding those 4 arguments and the 4 counterattacks, so we can train ourselves up in this art of the dialectic so that we can tackle the final boss. The final boss of the text is Socrates describing the realm of being. So we're going to go back to the start and apply each of the sections to the dialectic. Right. Yes. We have kind of similar. That's great. That's great. Yes, there has to be something that gets you curious. Often it's an experience or something about this way of thinking that makes sense. Like, yeah, it would make sense that there should be something that's understandable. Like, we understand how to fix a toaster or how to fix a car. Why can't we understand the nature of reality or the meaning of life? And by the way, if we can understand the meaning of life, shouldn't we be able to experience the highest levels for ourselves to verify it? Yes. But if there's an understanding and a direct experience of the paradigm or the ideal, isn't that what like doctors do in medicine? They try their best to have a vision of the highest, healthiest body, but also understand all the parts and also understand all the deviations, illnesses, so they can get an art to benefit their patients? Shouldn't there be an art of the soul? And if that's the case, is that a kind of learning that we can take with us after we die? And if so, could that benefit us in where we go? And if we can reincarnate to even better dimensions? All of these questions are good ones. Whatever it is that led you in, hold on to it. Keep it as a question. That's part of reading. I'll translate a quote I want to share with you and tell me what you think. Sure. You shall read Ethics by Spinoza. I am interested in reading some Spinoza too. That's on my very long reading list. But of course, Plato is Socrates is most important. So, we are recognizing that there is the truth, there is the shadow. The same art can help us do both. And another way of saying that is the dialectic, if it is and if it isn't. But hang on a second, we were just talking about Aristotle. Aristotle, is his way of thinking is that being, or what we're calling the higher causes, the mind that made the world, the mind that decided it should be the way it is, the daemonic power and force that maintains the world and our problems, the higher causes. Socrates talked about his second search for causes. If it is or isn't. So dialectic is if being is. So if the higher causes or being, if that realm of knowable being is, that's philosophy. True philosophy, proper philosophy. Or what we can even call philodianoia, because this is the love of wisdom. Wisdom is just one of the virtues, but all of the virtues seek philodianoia. They seek understanding, which is the mastery of the dialectic. But also, that's side A. You also have side B. If it isn't. If it isn't. We can call that modernism. It's our modern way of thinking. We can call it materialism. There's just the physical world. Or we can call that Aristotelian. So this is a dialectic on philosophy. You got to do both. If the being or higher causes is, and if it isn't. This is the quote from chat. Happiness is not a reward granted after virtue. It is virtue itself. We do not experience happiness because we suppress our vices, but rather we can suppress vices because we experience happiness. That's the quote. That sounds like... Okay, so that's a good quote. Let me read it one more time. Happiness is not a reward granted after virtue. It is virtue itself. So it's virtue only. Virtue only is the highest happiness or state of mind. We do not express happiness because we suppress our vices, but rather we can suppress our vices because we experience happiness. Okay, so virtue only, the highest state of mind. And it's also tied to suppressing. suppressing our vices. Right. So, how does this? So we can use this quote to practice the art of the dialectic. Now, what does that mean? Well, in the ideal or the paradigm, we recognize the virtues are activities we do in the physical realm What are the virtues? Wisdom, courage, and temperance. And above all that is justice, wisdom. So this is our snowman. Wisdom is the thinking part of the soul, of our psyche. The middle part is our outward moving. And the bottom part is our desires. So we can say our wisdom is the virtue associated with our reasoning. Courage is our outward moving. And temperance, sometimes called sound-mindedness. Temperance is to do with our desires. So we have our desires, our outward, and our reasoning. And the fourth virtue is, of course, justice, which is all of them together. And in the text, it's called a harmony. So there has to be a harmony. They have to work together. Meaning we have to be desiring the same thing that we hold on as true with courage. And that thing we hold on to true should inform our reasoning. And if we have all of that together, we should be able to function in a beneficial way to ourselves and others. So this would be the harmony of the virtues. Okay? Now, in the text, Socrates says our purpose, right at the end, last thing we talked about is okay, don't you ignore the other pleasures concerned with the body as being unlike the self, and instead be seriously concerned with the pleasures of learning. So how is that different from suppressing? This is interesting because these virtues are a practice. And we talked about having vices. We use so if our learning is the art of the logos, the virtues is to desire the art of the dialectic, learning, to seek it in your outward activities, to use the art of the dialectic in your reasoning, to function with it artfully in your conversations, in your thinking, and your contemplation, in this life and out of your body, and in the next life. So how is that different from suppressing your physical desires? Notice one is positive, you're actively seeking the pleasure in mastering the art of the dialectic, whereas in this quote, he thinks the virtues is suppressing your other desires. You still actually desire cake. You still actually desire food and drink and sexual stimulations. You just have to suppress it somehow. There's no mention of the art of the dialectic, so there's no understanding of the true virtues. They lack the art, they lack the understanding, the wisdom. They lack the wisdom. They lack the virtues, really. In fact, this would be called vice. Now, we can go back in the text also and say, hang on a second, why are we doing this practice or nurturing of the virtues? Well, if you are seized by the grip of the corporeal, the physical, and you keep company and have intercourse with the body, and you're in service of it, you're making your soul similar to the body. But this body is burdensome and heavy and earthly and visible. You're dragged back into the visible realm, and you have fear of the realm of being, the unseen, with your physical senses. Just like we're told about ghosts who can't go to the afterworld because they're still attached to the physical world. That's like your soul. Okay? And of course, if you live in that way, your reincarnation, you'll come back as a donkey. If you're interested in gluttony and arrogance, if you keep tyranny and injustice in your life, then you'll come back as a wolf or a hawk. But even people who we consider pretty good, like this, they suppress their desire for tyranny and their desire for gluttony, but they haven't been loving learning in the right way. They haven't been learning the logos. They haven't been learning the dialectic. They haven't been practicing the philosophy in the right way. They have other fears that keep them suppressing their desires. This is not the virtues. This is vice. They will not accomplish that deliverance and purification. They will not be going where philosophy leads. They will be clinging to their body. They'll think that their physical world is reality. They won't think that the whole reason we do the virtues is to separate from the physical to see the truth, the realm of being. It's like they're trapped in a cage. But true lovers of learning recognize that before you begin in philosophy, everyone is like that. Everyone thinks that. You're not born knowing there's a realm of being. You're born looking through your senses. You think there's just beliefs, that's it. And virtue is just fighting down, because that's physical. You fight physical. Ideas are not fighting. Ideas are not violence. They're not suppressing. Philosophy, those who are true lovers of learning recognize that when philosophy takes hold of their soul, they're in that state of affairs. Thumbs up. So philosophy gently encourages her and tries to free you, your soul, by revealing to you that searching through the eyes is full of deceit, just like the ears and the other physical senses. Philosophy will persuade your soul to withdraw from these as far as you are able and compel you not to use those things, but instead gather your soul together, collecting yourself into yourself. That's a puzzle. How do we do that? And by the way, if you do that, you can separate the soul from the body and experience the real beings by yourself, by being like them, because they are not physical. And trust what you see with nous, knowledge. That's what leads to the truth. Therefore, the soul of the true philosopher thinks to herself that her deliverance is, they're not opposed to that, and they keep away from pleasures, desires, and pains and fears. So it could be a kind of suppressing to begin with, but you've got a reason to do it. There's a goal for them. Okay? If you engage in excessive fear, pain, or desire, you have the worst harm, which is you'll believe that what you are experiencing through your physical senses is the most real and clear. That is the danger. You'll nail your soul to your body. But we need to purify our soul from that so that we can. Let's get rid of this. By the way, if you get into philosophy for a bit and then you get back into your body, it's like reincarnation. You'll become naturalized into your body. You'll become nailed to the body. But we don't want to do that, so we can become in communion. We don't want to use the word communion, it's religious. We want to join with the divine, with the pure and the oneness. Therefore, it is for the sake of this being, these beings, that we love learning, that we have the virtue of temperance, that we have the virtue of courage, that we have the virtue of justice. All of the virtues are so that we can separate from the body, join with the divine in the realm of being by being pure like it. It is through likeness. And that's philosophy. It's not just through likeness, but it's loving learning, loving mastering the art of the logos and the dialectic. So if we are becoming pure and we are gaining understanding and it's an artful use, we are becoming like the daemon. We are becoming daemon-like. So, and then he goes on to say, by the way, that's why we don't do the virtues for the virtue's sake. Let's look for a coin. No. Exchange. Look, is here. We don't ignore or separate from our physical desires just to be, they call that stoic. No. We do it for a reason, so that we can actually spend our time developing our understanding. Not just understanding of the physical world like Aristotle, the realm of being like Socrates. And the reason we do that, which is the art of the logos, is so that we can experience it, not through our eyes and ears like Aristotle, through the soul, through ousia, through nous, like Socrates and the many others in his tradition. Therefore, and he goes, by the way, this mastering some pleasures so that you can do other pleasures, like was described in our quote, that's not actual virtue. That's fake virtue. To master some pleasures in order to be mastered by other pleasures, if you're still thinking that the pleasures or the physical world is what's real, that's not virtue. That's literally vice. You mastered your gambling problem so you can become a better drinker. So, the only right exchange for virtue isn't exchanging pleasures for pleasures, pains for pains. Like he said, it's not real courage if you do something because you're afraid of losing your money, some fear of losing money or being thought of as being a bad person. No. You do the virtues so that you can exchange them for the only valid currency for which they all must be exchanged. Phronesis. What the heck is phronesis? I don't know. That's been one of the questions we've been holding on to all this time. So you exchange the four virtues, wisdom, courage, temperance, and justice. You exchange them for phronesis. That's a rite of initiation, and if you go to the world of being, or Hades, or the afterlife, without this initiation, you haven't done your job, you haven't accomplished your purpose, your destiny, the reason you're alive, then you'll end up in the mud. What we are seeing now, where we are in the text, as the underpart, the muddy marshlands and terrible rivers. And you won't, but if you do this, do what? Separate from your desires to instead love learning, which is what? Repeating this, understanding this, repeating this, trusting this, and then going from that to understanding it, applying the dialectic to it. And if you do that, that gives you something called dianoia, that applying the dialectic to this text awakens nous. And if you've been doing this and practicing the virtues, which means just doing this at all times, seeking it at all times, thinking it at all times, desiring it at all times, then you can integrate it into, you can exchange all those virtues when you have that experience for phronesis. That's the initiation. And if you go to the next world with that in your back pocket, you will have been purified and perfected, and you will dwell with the gods. Therefore, as the saying goes, many call themselves spiritual, or many call themselves philosophers, but only this true philosophy is the real thing, the real philosophy and the real spiritual practice. And if you do it, just like Socrates says, I have done, you won't be worried when it comes to your death, because this, Simmias and Cebes, is my defense of philosophy. And therefore, I know that I am leaving you and my masters here, and I'm not worried. I don't have any complaints, because I am reasonably led to trust that there, no less than here, I will find good masters and good friends. This is my defense of philosophy. Now you do it. Do it. Risk this belief. Repeat it as a love of learning. Do the dialectic. Master that. That's your doorway to nous. And if you go to nous with the dialectic, then you've traded in your virtues for phronesis. That's what you want. That's the initiation. That's what we are here to do. Now, that's the paradigm. This is why we read Socrates first. If we go back to Spinoza, or wherever that quote came from, he says there is virtue only. He doesn't understand. He's not trusting the right thing, number one. So he's got no good trust. He's got no dianoia, and he doesn't have nous, and he doesn't have phronesis. So we can judge where he's at on the ladder. Quite low. So if we have reasonable trust or true learning, if we have learning the dialectic and dianoia, and if we have nous and we have phronesis above there, and then so these are all cognitive functions, but also they apply to not just ways of thinking, but levels of reality. So we can have levels of reality too, because below this line is the world of becoming, the physical. So we have opinions, we have prejudices, and so on. So he's below this line. He's not doing real learning. He's not doing dialectic. He's not doing dianoia. He's not doing nous. He's not doing phronesis. And there's even a level beyond that we have a question about, which we're carrying with us. So to say the virtues is the highest state of mind is missing the mark really badly. It's not. It's a kind of preparation for the greatest experiences of mind. So the greatest states of mind, so these are cognitive functions, but over here you have states of mind. So nous is very high. That's a very good state of mind. Phronesis seems to be even better. We could have often nous is called enlightenment, but the daemon would be higher with phronesis. So we can have the daemon state of mind, have enlightenment experiences. But then there are levels of those. And then there are, of course, states of clarity in your thought when you're developing the dialectic. So him to say virtue only, and that's the highest state of mind, is below this line here. It's quite low in his thinking. And if he's thinking that you just suppress the desires, you don't have you're not replacing them for love of learning, that once you hit nous, you have a different kind of virtue. So the virtues are only, no. The virtues are to be exchanged for this virtue. The virtues are a kind of practice or nurture to get into different things, until you have the virtue of all virtues, which doesn't change. So this virtue for its own state. But even phronesis isn't good enough, because you also have to have the art of the logos. So you can maintain, that's been a key theme today. If you reach phronesis, how do you maintain it? You need the art of the logos. So we could say this way of thinking, and of course, if it's not Socrates, it's probably going to be in this tradition of Aristotle. That's modernism, that's materialism, that's Aristotelianism. And we can say, oh, he's in side B. This quote goes into side B. If being or the highest causes don't exist, then you're only in the physical world. All you can do is suppress your physical desires for its own sake. Whatever happiness that you get from that suffering, that's the highest. There's nothing beyond it. That's called Stoicism. This way of thinking is called Stoic philosophy. Using the language of Socrates, the language of true philosophy, using the term virtue, but taking out being. So it would be, you could say one way of understanding Stoicism is to use the word virtue, but put it inside B. If virtue does not exist. Why? Because it's not saying there is no virtue, it's saying virtue doesn't exist. So this quote we could say is Stoic. If virtue does not exist. That's called Stoic or Stoicism. Now, what are we doing? We are using the dialectic to diagnose, but also to understand that way of thinking. If virtue doesn't exist is the heading for the dialectic. It's the title of the dialectic. If virtue does exist, you could be in real philosophy. If virtue doesn't exist, well, you're still talking about virtue, what it is itself. It is the highest state of mind. How does it function? You have to suppress your desires. How does it function others to others? You can maybe get great fame by being very stoic and maybe start your own podcast. Stoic philosophy is very popular, so you'll get a lot of clicks. And then finally, how do people relate back to virtue? They think it doesn't exist. It's not actually in being. So we did a dialectic, a mini dialectic on virtue, and we can understand that this title, If Virtue Does Not Exist, defines Stoicism and understands that quote. We're still saying there is virtue, it just doesn't exist. It doesn't have any existence beyond this line. Stoicism, it's a Stoic quote, which is popular. You get a lot of clicks because very few people have reawakened or rediscovered the text of Socrates that this whole thing is our purpose. Socrates is literally saying, if you don't learn the art of the dialectic, you will be below this line and you will have your various kinds of suffering. You will be Stoic. And that's called Aristotelianism. Now, that's interesting because we realize that, hang on a second, if we have one thing inside B, we can use it to shine a light on side A. That's using the dialectic for solving puzzles. Solving puzzles. So, with that in mind, we know that if being or the highest causes don't exist, that's what we think today. That's materialism, that's modernism, that's Aristotle, which is the line of thinking that deviates from Socrates that we are in. That's why we have all our problems. We don't have the word the in the Aristotelian tradition, the Latin tradition. That's where he went down. We don't look at being. We are Stoic. We are not in the game of philosophy. We are chained to our body. We are trapped in the cycles of reincarnation. We are trapped like we're drunk, suffering in fear, and we don't actually reach our purpose. We can't solve problems. Why can't we solve problems? Because we don't have the art that solves problems for our soul. So someone like that quote will never reach anything high in their soul. But we also can't solve human problems. So how can we use this to solve the puzzle of why we can't solve human problems? Well, we do have some causes. If the higher causes don't exist, then we can say we have the Aristotelian causes. The Aristotelian causes. So, but we are familiar with those. Like, to build a house, you need wood, you need a builder, you need blueprints, you need a family that wants to live somewhere. These are the Aristotelian causes. So how can we use those to discover the higher set of causes? This is the second search of causes. Because it seems like these Aristotelian causes are sufficient for creating all our gosh darn problems. But if we need the art of the logos, we specifically need to climb above that level of the ladder into being so we can gain true trust, love of learning, dianoia, art of the dialectic. Because the art of the dialectic is here, that's needed to solve the problems. In other words, the kinds of causes we use to think about our world today, the Aristotelian causes, are sufficient to give us problems, but are not sufficient to solve problems. So we have a huge question that Socrates is giving us. The second search for problems. The second search for causes. He didn't tell us what those second causes was. He's just telling you one of them is mind. He gave us some hints. He said, hey, look, bones, sinews, that's in the side B, the Aristotelian causes. But in side A, there is mind. There is what's best. There is a force, a daemon-like force to maintain. So in other words, we need to fill out the terms for the Aristotelian cause and see why these cause problems, and we have to use the dialectic to solve the puzzle. What would be the greater set of causes that our problems are there to teach us about? We have problems so we can learn the truth. That's here. We learn the art of the dialectic to purify ourselves as well as through perfection, and they help each other. So that can be one of the tasks that we can keep on the table. We can do it next time or maybe a little bit later. But one of the puzzles that Socrates hasn't solved is, well, he said, hey, you need to learn the art of the logos. Hasn't told us what it is. So that's our big one. Number 2, I'm going to tell you about my second search for causes. He didn't tell us what they were, meaning he wants us to solve the metaphor. We need to find what the real causes are. Otherwise, we'll end up like our friend in the chat told us about, this kind of very, very popular quote, virtues are for their own sake. There is no higher happiness or state of mind other than suppressing the virtues, suppressing the vices, keeping us trapped in our body. Trapped in prison, trapped in our problems. So this is common. So we have to understand why this is common and how we can get out of our problems, because Socrates didn't give us the causes he discovered in the second search for causes. If he's not giving us the causes, what is he doing? He is maintaining our question. He is helping us. That's being daemon-like. He is helping us because now we have something to apply our dialectic to. We are going to go back. We're going to apply the dialectic. This is our training of the dialectic. We're going to go through the text to the opening, his doctrine, his demonstration. So his definition of philosophy, his demonstration of philosophy, his division, helping the talking to Simius and Cebes individually to cure themselves from their problems. And that's our training for the last step, the synthesis into the true earth. So that's our training, but also part of our training, we'll be able to use that training of applying the dialectic, training up in the dialectic, what we're literally here for, what we should be practicing at all times. That's our nurture. That's the true virtue, by the way. That should be exchanged for something. So we're doing this to get to something even higher, but we're doing it. So good for us. Clap. When we have that under our belt, we can go back to that question that he left for us. He left of us the second search for causes. So we are going to look at what are the Aristotelian causes and what are the true causes. And above that, like he said, so these are the Aristotelian causes. Level 1 of the analogy, level 1. And then there's a level 2. We are going to use level 1 as a metaphor. That's analogy. That's how we learn to find what the true causes are at the higher level. But also, remember, there's always that third level. There's the lesser, the greater, and the whole. That's in the text. He said, hey, by the way, these self-terms, that which we stamp the seal absolutely, that which absolutely is not just greater and lesser. He said, look, all of these things that we grasp through self-knowledge, nous. By the way, that quote doesn't mention nous. In the quote, in text. That quote doesn't mention nous. That's why we have the virtues. The only happiness is suppressing your vices. Well, what about nous? That seems like it's bliss. You know everything. You are beauty itself. Seems like greater than suppressing your desires. Okay, of course he doesn't think there's such a thing as nous. He rejects being. That's Aristotle. That's his problem. We can go into why he has the problem. That's another thing we can do. When we have the art of the dialectic, we can diagnose Aristotle. Yay, that'll be fun. Do we cheer for that? Anyway, so this nous, that we have the beings that we stamp the seal, that which absolutely is. So when we do this dialectic, whether or not something is, we mean, does it exist in nous or being? If being exists, that's what it is. If it isn't, then it's just in the world of becoming. That's what the dialectic means. That's pretty cool.
Wow.
Okay. Well, we have certain things. We have the good of self, justice itself, holiness itself, all of those beings, but we also have a different list. The greater, the lesser, and the equal are such beings. So, one of 3 of those beings are a very peculiar set of terms. Today we've been talking about, actually in the text I think he also mentions, he mentions likeness and unlikeness and same and different. It's in the first hypothesis of Parmenides too. Here we go, same and different. So we've got different classes of ideas in the realm of being. Same and different, which are needed for analogy, for logos, for reasoning. This is same and different. Likeness, we become, that's also needed for analogy, but we become like the daemon. That's the spiritual initiation. That's how what brings us up to being like Socrates or like the divine. That's the law, the pure with the pure. Likeness. We have beauty and justice. We've been talking about their having an existence. But also we have, where were we? Here. We have lesser, the lower level, the world of becoming, like the fish is to sea as to sun is to stars, to the greater, that's needed for analogy. He's using this as an analogy to talk about the nature of the soul. But hang on a second, there are 3 levels, the lesser, the greater, and in the Greek it's whole/equal. The lesser, the greater, the whole. Now sometimes it's called the equal, but it's different from equal and unequal. That's a duad. Sometimes it's lesser, greater, whole, but it's whole also has a different meaning, whole and part. This is a specific one. So that's why I call it ultimate. Because equal and unequal are in one category of duads, like whole and part. Justice, beauty, goodness, they don't have a duad, but this is a triad. So you got a 1, 2, and 3. 1, 2, and 3 kinds of beings in Usia. So lesser, greater, or ultimate, or level 1, level 2, level 3. Just like Altos has that in it. The world of becoming, the world of being. So one of our tasks is Socrates' second search for causes, and that's what we're going to be doing after we have more training in this art of the dialectic. That's exciting.
Wow.
Good for us. And we're going to take that back with us to have a look at, okay, what are the physical causes like bones and sinews? We have some help because we're very familiar with them. In fact, we call them the Aristotelian causes. That's what moderns think with. That's what science people think with. That's what Aristotelian people think with. That's what, I don't know if Spinoza's into that or not, I'm not sure. But that's what the quote today was about. Stoics, vice for vice, virtue for suppressing vices, and that's all. Okay, but that's going to be because we're interested in reading or puzzle solving or using the dialectic to solve puzzles. That's going to be a reflection of the true causes in the realm of being. If it is, what's that called? The realm of truth. So for every Aristotelian cause, there should be a true cause in the realm of being, but lesser, greater, that's the analogy, but there's the ultimate. There will be a cause even for those causes. So that's what Socrates says. Hey, these people like Anaxagoras who said, oh, mind exists, just like you might have a physics teacher who says, oh, I think consciousness exists, but he doesn't go into it. He just gets stayed in the, oh yeah, mind probably exists, but I'm more interested in atoms and physical forces. Socrates says that's what happened to Anaxagoras. He said mind existed, but he didn't go into that whole set of causes. He went back into the physical. Like the world was being carried by an actual physical atlas, physically carrying the earth. That's not what keeps the forces of reality together. There's not actually a physical person holding the earth together. There are forces in consciousness or mind or being that necessarily causes the things, causes them to be best for what they are, and maintains them. And we also have daemons, so that's not physical too. So we know that we have daemons. They're our spiritual guides. I talk to them. In fact, that's why I'm in prison. I talk to my daemon. Most people think their negative daemon is them. The negative one, the one that keeps your problems alive, they don't realize it's actually not literal. It's a metaphor. It's terms to tell you about the higher that you will only unpack if you do the dialectic on it. That's why it's there. So therefore they are chained to their problems, their vices. They think that it's true because they don't realize it's not. So the daemon is not a physical cause. So that's in this list of causes. But also there's a third level, the cause for causes themselves. And that's what we're going to do. Okay? So this is another prep or conditions or teaser or cliffhanger or teaser for what we're going to be doing now in the series. We're going to go back. We're going to apply the dialectic to the sections of the text so we can train up, so that we can, first of all, face the final boss of the true earth, but also finish this puzzle that Socrates is being daemon-like for us by giving us a question that we can maintain, keep us puzzling. What would be the higher set of cause? Take it with you. It might be a few weeks until we get to that level. So find out what the Aristotelian causes are. Are they a complete set, or does Aristotle even miss a couple? Use the dialectic. Can you use the dialectic to find how many causes there might be? And what would be their analogy in the realm of being? Have a guess. Create a hypothesis. Take many hypotheses, carry them out and see what pans out best. That's important. And then finally, what would be the cause for even them? And could we call that a special kind of cause? So what have we got here? a kind of ladder that has a strict division becoming underneath, being over here, and another level beyond being. Oh my God, that looks like the ladder of the dialectic we've been using the whole time. Try it out. Keep it in your mind. Ponder about it. Walk and reflect wherever you're walking to while you're singing or chewing gum or whatever you're doing. Okay? Because that's going to be one of our tasks we're going to come back to at the end. What are we going to do? Train our asses up in the dialectic so that we can face the final boss and solve all the other questions that Socrates has left us to discover. He mentioned, it's important that you... Actually, he literally said it. He said, hey, look. Tell you what I'm going to do. I am going to... Where is it? Here. Socrates was absorbed in thought, self-absorbed in thought, in reflection for a long time, and contemplating about something. Then he said, "It is no thoughtless matter which you seek, Cebes, the cause of generation and destruction, to see whether or not our soul is destroyed. It needs to be wholly and thoroughly investigated. It needs to be." He's saying you need to do it. We need to do it. If you wish, I will give to you my personal experience concerning this. One of the reading themselves, and also the honorific, the higher causes. I'll give you my personal experience. Afterwards, you bring something to light useful for you. You make use of it, and you persuade us. Here's the search for causes. He says you figure it out. You make use of it. You use your study of the dialectic to find the puzzles, find the terms, arrange them, and use the dialectic to persuade it. How do you persuade? The dialectic. That's what Socrates has been doing. So use the dialectic to pull out the question, pull out the answer, and structure your answer in a persuasive way. That's why he didn't actually talk about what he got to. He said, hey, Anaxagoras dropped the ball. He went back into physical causes, bones and sinews. But I realized that was dumb because these bones and sinews would be making their way towards Megara or Boeotia if my opinion that what is best or more just or more beautiful is to be somewhere else, I wouldn't be here physically. There's a third level, the cause for causes he didn't get into, and he missed what keeps things together and the daemon. This is my second search for causes. So he didn't do it. So he's saying, use the dialectic to figure out the puzzles, figure out the terms, and persuade us. So this is something we need to level up our training in the dialectic to be able to do. So this is one of the things we're going to do. We're going to go back, we're going to do the dialectic, train our asses up, use the dialectic to divide the text, and for each part of the text, do the dialectic. That will improve our dialectic skill, so that we can make sense of the final part, the final boss, the true earth, and also use that to figure out how this is to do with what he said is mastering the art of the logos, and also solve his question about the true causes. He also didn't quite finish the argument about whether the soul is immortal and indestructible. He says it's been necessarily proven that it's immortal, but we said with Simmias, we also have to give an argument for why it's indestructible. So he's leaving us that task to do as well. So those are the three big ones. What exactly is the art of the logos? Number one. What is the higher set of causes? Number two. And number three, how can we use the art of the dialectic to prove that the soul is not just immortal, which has already been done for us, but the next level, indestructible. And D, or number four, how can we use it to defeat the final boss, the true earth? That's what we're doing. And that's what we're here for. And that makes all the difference. That's literally the art we're here for, that we should enjoy, that we're doing our virtues to not to suppress everything else, but because this is so gosh darn awesome and cool and unifies us, we need to practice it, not just definition, but demonstration. This is what we're here for. This is what will make the virtues worth doing. It takes some habit and practice, but eventually we can upgrade into phronesis, where it'll be automatic. It'll be ours forever. It's a state of bliss, or maybe even beyond bliss. So it's a much higher level of happiness than being in our physical body. And it will help us not only free ourselves from our problems or the chains of our physical problems, but even free ourselves from the prison of reincarnation, going to the underworld of the realm of being and not to the surface, and maybe even beyond the surface of being to the ultimate level, the cause of even being. Thanks for following. Coming at a right time. Thank you so much for the follow. On that note, on that cliffhanger, and on that amazing summary, thank you so much for the questions. Fantastic questions. It's amazing how relevant the questions seem to be. So long as we apply the dialectic to us, almost as though we are being guided by some providential daemon. That's something to wonder about. How does this all play out in our everyday lives? So that's what we're doing next time. That's why we're training, and that's why the thumbnails will probably be Dragon Ball Z related. Because when I watched it as a kid, it was Goku, the hero, and his family and friends training for a very long time because they knew a big boss was on the way. That's us. We know what we have to do. We know what we have to do to train for it. We just have to do the training and enjoy the training and practice the training. And we know if we can do it, it will pay off in the greatest possible way. We are literally defeating not Vegeta and Nappa, the Minotaur. What's that represent? Death itself, reincarnation, slaying our fears of ignorance, our fears of the death of the soul, our fear of death, slaying our ignorance of the soul, freeing ourselves not only from our suffering in this world, but in our many incarnations. Stakes are super, super high. We have the potential to go Super Saiyan. Now, not Super Saiyan like the anime, but the thing that the anime reflects. For it to be so appealing and have such mass appeal, it must tap into some kind of, where is our picture? Shadow of the truth. The idea of training and leveling up to go Super Saiyan so you can defeat in physical violence the anime enemy of Vegeta is a reflection that makes it interesting of the truth. We are leveling up through our training of the art of the dialectic in the text so we can defeat the ultimate boss, our problems, and gain the truth of the nature of our soul and being and the meaning of life, and the experience of that in separating from our body, nous, beauty itself, justice itself, what's called bliss, or the Isles of the Blessed. Socrates calls it in the Republic. But even then, that's just the sixth dimension. We want to go beyond that ladder to even the cause of that. That's the true journey we are preparing for. The Super Saiyan to Super Saiyan God level, or whatever you want to call it. That's what we're up to. That's why we're doing it. That's why it's the most important thing. That's why we're taking our time, because it's a kind of new reading. It's not about how many books you can read, how quickly. It's about how deep you can read the one book. I think there's a quote from someone. I don't fear the man who's read 100 books one time. I fear the man who's read one book 100 times, or something to that effect. We are reading the best kind of book, the archetype for all other books, you could say, in the greatest sort of way, while also discovering this new thing of how to read. How to read, and using the dialectic to make sense of it. How to read, which might itself be the art of the dialectic. Awesome. That's what we'll do next time. On that cliffhanger, thank you so much for joining me. Thank you for joining me in chat. You feel free to watch along in real time on Twitch or on YouTube for the live stream. Feel free to like and subscribe on YouTube. You can join the Discord, link below. There's a text below for free. We also have another series on purification, using the dialectic to solve our problems. That's a new one that's just started. Hopefully I'll add a couple of those up every week. I hope you enjoy that. If you think this is worth doing and you have the means, you can support on Patreon. That would be greatly appreciated. And I hope you're puzzled. Maintain your questions and your puzzles. That makes you pure like a daemon. Shine bright like a daemon. Shine bright like a daemon. Sometimes I sing. Okay. See you next time.